Hello, Motor Rider World fans, and welcome to this episode of Talking MotoGP with myself, Rob Portman, and Paul Scott, as always. First of all, sorry about a couple of weeks ago with Jerez. We were both busy. Paul was busier than I was. He was cycling from the East Rand to Hawaii or something.
Clarence.
All over the show. And to kick this week's show off, Paul, we're going to start with a round, and please, everybody in the comments as well, we're going to start with a nice sing for Paul, because Paul, it was your birthday, I believe, the other day.
Yeah, on Saturday. Yeah, I'm an old toppy now, Rob.
Yeah, no, you look good for 26. You really do.
Thank you.
Let's start with a quick happy birthday song before we get into this week. So, Paul, here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Paul. Happy birthday to you. That's all you get.
Much appreciated. Thank you, and everyone else.
Well done, Paul.
Yeah, lekker. Thanks, Rob.
It's I spoke to James on Sunday night, and he was like, it's Paul's birthday, and I was like, no, I have no idea it's Paul's birthday. So anyway, I promised him I'd sing, and I've sung to you now. So there you go.
Thank you.
Let's have a look at the podium then. It's Harvey Lowe on pole position. Hello all. Man, what a weekend in France. That crash of Mark was insane. I'm glad he's okay and recovers well. Great to see you at Le Mans, Rob. Hope the sunburn is better. Thank you so much, Harvey. It was brilliant to be there. I'll talk about it, but yes, the sunburn still a little bit. You can see I'm still lobster red. And I learned my lesson, because I was told the weather was just going to be dismal and rainy and horrible. So I just packed jackets and long pants and 12 pairs of undies and everything, and it actually turned out to be just 4 days of just beautiful sunshine, other than a downpour late on, which we'll get into. So yeah, but recovering well. Yvonne Pretorius in second place. Hi, Rob and Paul, missed you. Can't wait for the talk tonight. Yvonne, everybody, I hope you're comfortable. We got a lot to talk about. Wayne Taylor is in third position. Good evening, gents. Good to have you back. My chat wish list for tonight: when and not if will Martin be lifting the trophy this year? Question mark. Was this weekend the final nail in the BB33 MotoGP coffin? Question mark. And on the BB33 note, I personally don't want to see him in MotoGP anymore. If he is looking so dejected and down, rather him go somewhere else where he can be happy and enjoy his skills. So yeah, Brad's going to be a big topic of discussion tonight as well, so we'll definitely jump into that, as well Aprilia and Martin, Wayne, so don't worry, we'll have those topics covered. Wade Williams, Van Erasmus, Dick Crosby, CP Buertz, David Hawes, Al Camino, Robert De Sosa, Gary Foss. Everyone is joining us again. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And please have your say, as we always like to do. This is an open podcast. This is a podcast of fans, and let's all have our say. I'll try and get to as many of the comments in both the land of Facebook and YouTube as I possibly can. Please hit the like button if you're in the world of Facebook and YouTube. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe in YouTube. And again, the more comments in YouTube, the better for us. So thank you so much. James Dent. Hello, Tappets.
Yeah, squirrel.
Calling the kettle black or whatever, and I don't know what is. Stephen Kalgoxi and Andrew Walker also joining us. So, Paul, I've made a couple of notes here. I was very lucky. I'm going to start just with my general experience of Le Mans before we get into the talking points. I was very lucky to go to Le Mans. I'd been to Le Mans before, just with the Le Mans 24-hour with Sheridan Moraes. I'd never been to a MotoGP before there. And we all know from the outside, 300,000 fans over the weekend. We've seen the fans singing the national anthem, the packed stadiums, the everything. And I can honestly tell you, you kind of struggle to process it. You struggle to process how passionate people could be about motorcycle racing from a fan point of view and from a track point of view. Le Mans does things a little bit differently. So Le Mans own their Grand Prix. It's not like some of the other Grand Prix that go through Dorna, and it's very much run by Dorna. Le Mans run this GP. They do everything from printing the program to everything is Le Mans GP. They don't want any of that interference, and that's why they are so successful. And I can understand why they don't want to get Dorna involved, because they kind of bend the rules in many ways, like with the camps that they do, with the bikes revving and just fires everywhere. There's all, health and safety is there, if I can put it lightly. It's like it's present. It's not, in the UK you wouldn't get away with it, and in many other countries you wouldn't get away with it. But that's what makes Le Mans special. And I got to experience everything from the blue campsite, as they call it. I went there on Saturday night, and it's literally just 21 hours a day of bikes on the rev limiter, old school Japanese bikes with big horn cone exhausts coming out, and that's all they do. They don't even go watch the racing. They stay in that campsite and they just rev the tits off these motorbikes. Bop, 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 bop. They throw petrol and whatever flammables down. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. The MotoGP's on, and they just bop, 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 bop. They do this. They for 21 hours. You get 3 hours of silence, call it, and then they're back. Bop, 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 bop. And it's wherever you go in that campsite, and it's just people having fun, music playing, and it's all in good spirit, and it's all controlled, as I said. And then you get the actual fans that come to the race weekend. 311,000 over this Le Mans weekend, 112,000 on race day only. And when I talk about passionate supporters, Paul, they come and they support. There's no booing any rider. Every time Zarco or Quattararo is mentioned, it's standing ovation, it's clap, no matter where they are. Doesn't matter what position, nothing. They just support their riders. Every time there's a Moto3 or Moto2 rider that's crashed and they're up, it's an applause. It's just this contagious atmosphere. It really is. And one of the biggest key takeaways I took from it, from a South African point of view, is it's such a pity the likes of Rushay Mudley and Brad Binder still in the paddock now will never get to have a home GP to really experience that. You know what I mean? They get all the support in the digital world, and for those fans that are lucky enough to get to the track and see them, the one or two with the South African flags and that. But it would be awesome to have a packed Kyalami or wherever you have it in South Africa, just all showing their support. No matter the position, no matter what people think, you come together and you just support your troops. And that's what these French crowd do. And I just wish we could see that for all of our South African racers racing overseas. The other point I will make is, from a Le Mans point of view, I just looked at that circuit and how it's designed, the access roads, the fan zone, the parking, everything, and how it's built to operate at that level. And I look at that, and then I look at Kyalami and I go, there's no ways. As much as I love Kyalami and I'd love to see a GP happen there, there's no ways the current Kyalami would be able to accommodate a MotoGP in that capacity. I don't think you would get 311,000 people over a weekend in South Africa, but certainly, it just doesn't have that vibe. It doesn't have that atmosphere. It doesn't have the fan zone spots to park the trucks and the hospitalities. It doesn't have that. Whereas Le Mans just had everything. So, yeah, if anyone's thinking about a MotoGP to do and you're on the fence and you're wondering, it's an affordable one. Again, because Le Mans ran it, a weekend ticket was like €150, I think, which is 3-4 grand, which is still a lot of money in South African rands. Yeah. But, there's a lot of British people that come from the UK and go there because it's cheaper to go do a Le Mans GP than it is to Silverstone. So it's very accommodating in many ways, and it's just an experience that you'll never ever forget.
Yeah, Rob, it's one of those things, as you say. Now, I've done Mugello and Misano, which were two that you also mentioned, but just looking at that and watching, and the crowd participation, I think Jerez is probably very similar, but obviously for the Spanish riders. But what you say just makes you feel like you just want to go there and experience it and be part of it, and be part of, you want to go to a track where you feel invested and involved. And I'm surprised to hear you say that Le Mans run it on their own. And Dorna, I'm sure they've tried to step in. Le Mans probably said, look, there's no chance. But maybe that's the formula going forward for some of the tracks that are performing in terms of crowd capacity less than what they should be. Maybe Dorna need to look at this, or Liberty Media, and say, hey, maybe that's the right formula. I don't know. We don't know the complications there. But one thing I am going to say, Rob, we were very, very jealous seeing you there. So tonight, I'm going to do very little talking, because I think you must have so much info to impart with us, that, the behind the scenes stuff. So, yeah, looking really forward to it. And once again, good evening to everyone who's joined us for the chat.
Yeah, Paul, it is. When you're in that paddock, I've said it many times, and I've been lucky to be, this was my 18th MotoGP race that I've been to. So I've been very lucky. And when you're in that paddock, it's a different world. You see things, you hear things, some things you can't really say because, of legalities and whatever. But it just paints a completely different picture to a lot of the stuff that we talk about, to be honest, Paul, a lot of the stuff that we talk about, and there's a lot of good journalists that put a lot of good stuff out there, and it's very relevant and it's very true, and a lot of the subjects that we talk about are spot on, and from our point of view, Paul, and I must again thank you for joining me in this journey. We do this as fans of the sport as well, but I walk into the media room and I always feel like I don't want to say the ugly duckling, but in many ways, I do feel
like an outsider.
Yeah, I feel like the outsider. I know a lot of the guys there from my 2022 year stint with Darren, where I was doing a lot of weekends. So I built up some good relationships, but it's still very tight. Everyone's got their own little things. So I like take my lunchbox and sit in the corner like kind of by myself. But I must say, like the likes of Neil Morrison, very always, hello, Rob, how are you? How's the family? Watch your stuff. I really enjoy it. Again, just patting us on the back, saying, love the show. You guys are brilliant and how you talk about things. Again, Adam Wheeler is another one that's very accommodating and hello, Rob, and very welcoming. There's a lot of them in there that are very welcoming, and even walking around in the paddock, you get the odd British fan or English speaking fan that comes, hey, you Rob from MRW, I watch your show, keep it up. So it is a big pat on the back to all of us, to everyone involved, because the show is us. It's not me and you. The show is us. Without everyone else, there is no show. So it's, as I said, I went in there the outsider, but by the time you get there on Sunday, you feel part of the family, you feel accepted. And, I would love to do it on a full-time basis. Obviously travel and everything with the family is not possible, but it's special to be there, and we're going to talk a lot tonight about some of the things I heard and saw, and talking about, we've had some comments here already about Brad, where he's going, Marc Marquez. We've got some really good, relevant and truthful information regarding all of that. So let's dive into it. Johnny Martin's Rob's Tomato Weekend. And I promise you, my mom and my wife always tell me, pack sunscreen. Going to pour with rain, mom and wife. Leave me alone. And it was boiling. The Thursday and Friday, it was so hot. So anyway, it's I was a tomato for a weekend. Gwen Campbell's joined us, and Ian Luca Jefferson. Rob, EWC or MotoGP at Le Mans? Ian, it's a tough one, because MotoGP, you need the golden ticket. As a general spectator there, it was beautiful. You sit in the grandstand and you can enjoy it. But with the access that I got, the media pass, that really opened it up. Now, EWC, which is World Endurance, is it's still strict, but you have a lot more access as a fan. So it depends. If you want to go to MotoGP and see the world's best bikes and riders in action, but know that you're going to be constrained to kind of one grandstand seat for the weekend, still do the fan zone and that, which is amazing, then fine. But if you want more access, then I would say World Endurance. But then you don't have that, creme de la creme that is MotoGP. The fan zone stuff and the activities at Le Mans was amazing. They had riders on the main stage giving out prize. The riders were very accessible for autographs and pictures everywhere. They had stalls. They had selling everything you could imagine for really good prices. The amount of merch stands they had and food stand. You know what I mean? You were never going to stand in a queue for longer than 10 minutes. Even though there were 300,000 people over the weekend. That's how well set up it is. It really is so accommodating. So you can't go wrong going to Le Mans, I promise you. Ian, so either one. Paul, I think that the first place I'd like to start is the big news of Marc Marquez. Now, it's been a talking point the whole year that, the real Marc Marquez hasn't really shown himself. There's this unsure Marc Marquez, whether it was because of his injury or the bike or whatever. There was this hesitation with Marc Marquez, and he wasn't quite showing the form, certainly, that he had last year, where he just dominated. But since the crash with Bezzecchi, and it just, how's the world work? Bezzecchi takes him out, causes injury, and then goes on this long run. There's no malice or anything. It wasn't on purpose or anything. I'm just saying that it's funny how these work out. But I looked at Marc, and I'll quickly tell you a story on Marc Marquez. So I got this helmet signed, Manuel Poggiali. So he's the rider coach for the factory Ducati team for Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia. 2002, 2001, 125cc champion, and 2003, 250cc champion. So I've had this helmet, bought it here in the UK for a long time, finally got it signed. But I stood outside the truck on Thursday morning because that's the best time. Thursday, everyone's chilled. Paddock's not full. Cool. I'm going to wait here for what's his name now? Manuel Poggioli. So I'm waiting there. Now, normally, I have caps or something to sign from Marc Marquez. I'm normally standing and fighting with 100 people to get something from Marc Marquez. I'm standing there with Poggioli. Marc Marquez comes, looks at me. I say, "Hi, Mark." Hey. And he goes into his pit. Cool. 10 minutes later, he comes out again, looks at me, kind of gives me a nod, walks away. 10 minutes later, comes back, sees me. He goes, gives me another nod, goes in. But about the sixth time, eventually Mark comes in and says, "Are you waiting for Manuel?" Now, he's obviously put together that I'm holding this little, "Please, sir, can I have some So he's like, "Are you waiting for Manuel?" So I said, "Actually, this is 45 minutes later now. I'm in the boiling sun, but I want to get this done so I can carry on with my weekend. Yes, I'm waiting for Manuel." So he's like, "I haven't seen him. I don't know where he is, but let me see if I can go find him." "Oh, geez, Mark. Thank you very much." So off he goes, comes back a couple of minutes later. "Listen, sorry, I don't know where. I think he's in a meeting there, but just wait. He might come out soon." "Okay, Mark, and how are you?" "Yeah, no, I'm good. Thank you. Good. Blah, blah. Little quick 20-second conversation. "How are you? Good luck. Goodbye." And I thought, I've just had this access to Marc Marquez that people pay gazillions for or never in their life. And I'm standing with this helmet that it means nothing. And I'm like, I just had I was like flabbergasted. But for the guy to literally come to me and have that little bit of interaction was fantastic. But anyway, so I got my helmet signed, very pleased.
Very nice.
But then we went to the media debriefs and everything. And this is where you can't beat that being in the paddock and that one-on-one, because we see and we read all the things that the journalists put out, but you don't see the expression. You don't see how they're saying these things. You don't see the body language. And Marc Marquez, a lot of the riders are very expressive like that. And Marc, I was at Portimao a couple of years ago, 2022, when Marc was suffering with his injury, suffering with Honda. And I still remember that podcast saying I could see Marc was on the verge of giving up or something wasn't right with this guy. And then he made the announcement, not Mugello, a couple of races after, saying, "I'm going for the surgery and then we'll see." I kind of got that feeling from Marc in the first debrief that I got. I was like, this guy's not happy. He really isn't happy mentally, physically. Something's not right. Then Friday morning, I went trackside and I watched this Marc Marquez just cruising around like this track day rider, putting in an odd, decent lap, but then just cruising and this very upright and moving on the bike, uncomfortable. And I was like, "Oh, man, it's like, I know the championship's painting a massive different picture here now. Marc's never really had to chase down to win championships. He's always kind of got to the front, led, crashed, had the luxury of, crashing, losing some points, but he always had that buffer to play with. Now he's got to chase. And he's crashed at the race. So now he was riding, you could almost see a rider riding, overthinking. And Marc's strongest point has always been his mental strength. He could put that stuff aside and just go fast. He did all his talking on the track. From that Friday session, it just looked like there was this guy going, "Okay, don't crash. Okay, Bezzecchi, you can't let Bezzecchi go. Okay, oh, my arm's sore." Just overthinking things, and I mean, it showed. Didn't make it into Q2, got into Q1. So that was my first sign. Then at the end of Friday, he came in still looking not happy, but kind of said, the result doesn't kind of reflect. There's more in the bike. But he was very honest, and he's like, "I'm just not understanding my riding style with this bike at the moment." And if you look back at those, those were all hints that I'm suffering with my shoulder and I can't get comfortable. It's not a case of my riding style of the bike. It's this pinched nerve or this plate that went loose and was touching a nerve in his arm that he couldn't get comfortable. And if you look at him, he's always kind of doing this. He's always trying to get his shoulder comfortable. But he said, it's not as bad as it looks. We'll be fine for Saturday. And then I heard that and I thought, okay, this is Marc Marquez. I know exactly what he's going to do. He's going to go smash the lap record in Q1, and he's going to put this thing on pole position in Q2, and he's just going to silence all the critics.
Yeah.
Great. Then Marc Marquez comes out Q1 and he puts in this blinder, this 29.2 lap record, demolishes everyone. I mean, still, I think the pole time in Q2 was like a 29.6 or something. So
6, yeah.
0.4 quicker than that. He didn't replicate it, but put himself in the front row. Cool. Then you kind of got the idea, like, right, okay, that was a big statement from Mark. That was a, listen, shut up, everyone.
Yeah.
I'm still in this championship. Great. Then the crash happens, then the race happens. Didn't get the start that he wanted. I was watching trackside in that kind of first sector, and you're kind of just waiting, okay, maybe he's just taking a lap or two to get comfortable. He's going to come. He's going to come. He's going to come. And you're like, okay, eventually this guy's not coming, and again, looking very uncomfortable on that bike, very stiff, very upright, very rigid. Then he makes the mistake, and it's his fault. I've seen a couple of snippets of the Ducati Lenovo YouTube video that's going to come out tomorrow, where he's sitting in the pits and he actually breaks down in tears to his team. Like, he's been lying to his team about the injury and he's so sorry, and it's his fault. So there's all this emotion buildup. But he runs a little bit wide onto the white line, and in the debrief, all the other riders that were asked, they said, there's a massive crack there, and if you touch that, it offsets the bike, and that's exactly what happened to Mark. But typical Mark, he doesn't do things in a small way. The front tucks, and instead of just tucking away and floating, it tucks boots and it chucks him in this massive, horrible accident. Anyway, comes straight back into the pits on a Zero LS1 scooter, by the way.
Oh, nice.
Sponsored by Zero Motorcycles, which was
very
fantastic.
Nice.
And he comes back into the pits within an hour and a half. I've spoken to Spanish media, told them, listen, I've had this nerve problem. We found it out after the rest test. I was going for surgery anyway. I've broken my foot now. I'm going for surgery. I'm out for Le Mans, the rest of Le Mans, and for Catalonia at least. But so there's two big talking points here, and I'll catch up with a lot of the comments now and get your point of view. The two big talking points I have here that everyone wants to know is, obviously, is this now the end of Marc Marquez? Could retirement be a realistic option now for Marc Marquez? Has, lying there in that surgery bed again, you sit there going, what am I doing this for? I've got millions. I'm 9 times world champion, blah, blah, blah. There is obviously a conversation that he wants number 10. He wants to beat Rossi. We all know that. Okay. And I see it as a 50-50 split, in my honest opinion. If an announcement came out that Mark was going to retire at the end of this year, I wouldn't be shocked, because it's got to that point. I saw a very dejected Marc Marquez this weekend, and there's only so many of those punches you can take, Mark. That Honda one was a big one. This is a big one. Mark is 110% rider. He doesn't want to ride at 109%. He wants 110%. And if he can't be that, then he'll call it. But then there's the second side of it, where, and if you look at the interview very carefully that he did with Spanish TV, and I think with TNT or someone else, we didn't get to speak to him as the media. He had those 2 interviews, hopped in his car straight off to Barcelona for surgery. So we didn't get any access to him. But if you look at the one comment that he makes, where he says, in that Q1, I proved that I'm still fast and I can still, basically I can still do this. So I look at that and I go, that was a big statement from Mark, because I think he not only proved to all of us that he's still the champion and he's still the fastest man, but I think he also proved to himself, from the Mark that I saw on Friday that was doubting, to that Mark in Q1, I saw, a little bit of self-belief come back, and right, I can do this. And I think if he didn't have that crash, I think the sprint was kind of a write-off. He would have probably got past Mir and maybe 1 or 2 others, and potentially a better Sunday race, depending on the start. But I think that's the glimmer of hope that I'm holding on to, certainly as a Marc Marquez fan and a MotoGP fan, wanting to keep Marc in the sport, is that had he continued with a crappy weekend, had he not put in that Q1 performance and then had this crash, I almost think he would have gone, you know what, I'm my back's against the wall here. I've got nothing left to give. But that Q1 performance just kind of kept that flame burning, if you know what I mean. So I still think we're going to see Marc coming back. So floor is yours, Paul. Let me know what you think.
Yeah, Rob, I do agree with you. I think that, funnily enough, me and James were talking a while ago after his crash with Bezecchi last year. And we said, first of all, he's not old by any manner of means, but he's certainly in the MotoGP paddock, he's old. Now he's taken a few big hits, much like Rossi. Rossi, I think, only ever broke his leg, I think it was 2010 at Mugello, where he broke his leg. Other than that, he had been very lucky. Mark initially had been very lucky. Then obviously we know the drama from when he broke his arm. So that weakened his physique a little bit. And no matter how tough or strong or how much physio or who helps you, when you've had a fracture like that, Rob, I think, let's just say you lose 5% of your natural strength. at MotoGP level, we've discussed this how many times? You've got to be, like you said, Mark's 110%. So now his comfortable point is 105%. That's not him. He's not happy. So I don't know. So as I was saying, James and I discussed this. 1 or 2 more big crashes for Mark could see him done this year. Now, he had a big crash at Kota. Didn't tell anyone. We saw it the next week at Jerez, the burns on his arms, or 2 weeks later. That's a big crash. Rob, sliding down the tar at 190 Ks, no matter how good your suit is, there's friction and heat. So that's a heat burn. You know what a burn is like. Anyway, then we come to Lamar. Exactly what you say. He didn't look good. He's certainly having problems with that shoulder, which, I mean, that shoulder was in September of last year. So we've had 6, nearly 7, 8 months, and it's still not right. And I know this is possibly something else has caused it, whether it's the amount of motocross the oak does, I don't know. So I agree with you, the fact that, he proved to himself, he doesn't care about anyone else. He proved to himself that 129.2, I can do this. But at what cost? So he certainly, which is unlike Mark, first 4 or 5 laps of the sprint or of any race this year, he hasn't been himself. And I think he certainly has doubt. So, and it's been plaguing me a little bit. Why haven't Ducati announced his signature on that contract? Yes, I know there's a behind-the-scenes story with Liberty Media, which you probably know more than we do. There's just drama with the race teams and Liberty sorting out whatever it is, TV rights, I don't know. Is that holding back? Because apparently none of the teams have signed for after 2027. They all had a contract till then. So could that be part of the thing? I don't know. But I'm with you, Rob. 50-50. I don't know. I think what he'll do, he's had the shoulder fixed. He's had the foot fixed. Probably, so he'll miss Mugello this weekend. And then 2 weeks after that, Barcelona, 2 weeks after that, I think is Mugello. Hopefully he's back for that. But if he's not, then I think we've got a more chance that he's not going to continue this year, or he'll continue. And if it's not right, we might see the end of Mark in this season. So I'm with you. I think it's a 50-50 decision. If he comes back and that shoulder's good to go, then we'll see the Mark. I'm not saying he'll dominate. He's going to have his hands full with a certain Aprilia factory team. But I think we'll see a Mark challenging and fighting. But if it's not 100% right, I think he'll ride out the season. And he's that kind of guy. He'll say to Ducati, it's not right. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. Let's put Brad Binder on the factory Ducati, and he can ride alongside Acosta again. They know each other, and they'll be good mates.
There we go. Paul's just solved all the problems for us. Commentary from Michael William, which I absolutely agree with. It's not only about strength; it's about the mobility. Mark, you look at all these previous seasons. They always used to focus on Mark doing his stretches. He could put his leg up here, and he always said, I often get away without big injuries from my crashes because of my mobility. I'm very flexible, and that, as you said, over time, and everything else that happens, that wears away. And that's where Mark's got to the point, and if you look at Maverick Vinales, the same problem with his shoulder. It's that similar kind of thing. Once there's nerve damage and plates and movement like that, it never really comes right. A plate moving in your shoulder, what I mean?
Yeah. Rob, it comes right for normal day-to-day living. Well, but not to ride a MotoGP bike at 110%. And how many times have we discussed it on the show? The margins have got so tight now. It's not 15 years ago, 20 years ago, where the gap between first and 10th was 3 seconds in qualifying. What have we got now? We've got 12 guys in Q2. And if you 3/10 off the pace, you've finished 12th. So those are the margins today. So that's the difference between, maybe a Mick Doohan injury. And that's a bad example because his was a severe injury. But your margin now between winning and not making Q2 is, it's insane. So that's what people must understand. He'll be able to go home and have a braai and swim in the pool. But to get on a MotoGP bike, which is not like getting on your GSXR 1000 and going to Hardy Beer Sport Dam. It's a little bit different to that, So that's what we've got to take into account. And these guys, and Mark specifically, and as I showed you a couple of weeks ago, I've read that new book that Matt Oxley did on him. He's a winner. He's only there to win. And no disrespect to a guy like Toprak. He knows he's there to finish 12th for the next 2 or 3 seasons. Mark is there to win. And that's the difference. So I think time will tell. Obviously, I'm hoping that it's the magic solution, but I got my doubts. Is there a magic solution to, and shoulder injuries? Maybe if it had been something else, but I mean, any appendage on a MotoGP bike is a problem. So I think he's certainly on a downward trend, but saying that, people are kind of writing him off, and he showed on Saturday. Don't write me off just yet. So let's see what the outcome of this surgery is.
The other big problem for Marc Marquez and everyone, and Ducati included, is if the pace was kind of similar to last year or just a little bit better, Marc could probably get away with it. The biggest problem now is, we'll talk about it in depth later with Aprilia. Aprilia have just done what Ducati did all those years ago. They've done that. They haven't just done this now. I saw it this weekend, and I said we'll talk about it later, so I'm not going to dive into it too much here. But Aprilia have taken it there. So Marc's now thinking, I'm not having to try and beat a Pecco Bagnaia. You've got this. I'm having to try and beat, at 100 or not even at 90% with my shoulder, whatever. I'm having to beat these unstoppable Aprilias that can do anything. And I promise you, those were the words used by all the other riders when they spoke about that Aprilia. It can do anything, brake, turn, anything, launch, anything. So again, I'll talk about that a little bit later. But these are the things that Marc's got to deal with. Does he want to come back to try and take that on? I'm sure he will. There's a competitor inside Marc. He knows that. But at the end of the day, reality's got to kick in. You've got your girlfriend talking to you, your dad talking to you, everyone around you talking to you. You've got to take all that into consideration. But another big thing, where's the comment that I wanted to see? Like Michael Foyun says, we speak about another big thing I learned from this weekend in the MotoGP is how how the tires. The Michelin tire runs MotoGP at the moment. It really does. We know it's kind of benefited Ducati over the years, and it's been a hindrance to KTM, but it's got to a point now, from the information I got at the paddock, that that Michelin front tire especially is so temperamental for both rider and machine that it's like a hit or miss. It's really this funny thing. And if your bike's not spot on agreeing with it, then we see what happens with Marc and other riders. You either got to back off, slow your pace down, or you're going to land on your head. It's that simple. There's no compromise. So Michael Fournier, as you said, I think having a somewhat clean slate in terms of all manufacturers starting new with the 850 engine and aerodynamics will also be a factor for Marc, because Pirelli, Marc's got to also be considering that. This season's done and dusted. As you said, I think it's either going to be Marc trying to come back at early Mugello, maybe, to try and salvage something of a season, or he's going to say, right, Ducati, if you want me to stay on for 27 and potentially 28, then I'm taking 6 races off. Then I'm coming back 110% if I can. This is the thing. We can't guarantee that he's ever going to be 110% again, but I can be 109% or whatever, the best version of myself to give this a go. So that's another key factor that we've got to take into consideration. But again, I'm 50-50. I can see him saying that's it, and I can see him saying no. The little flame's still there. Q1 proved to me I'm sticking around.
And you see, Rob, the point you make about him coming back, is he going to take 6 races off and then see if he's okay? The only way he's going to find out if he's okay, as much as they do motocross, they do flat track, they do everything else, the only way he's going to find out if he's okay is when he jumps on the MotoGP bike and he's riding at 110%, be it Mugello or wherever it is. That's the only way I think he's going to find out how successful it's been and on which path he is. So, definitely we're not going to know for, I'm going to say, the next 3 weeks. I think, because I personally broke a collarbone, had a screw removed 2 years later. They took the plate out and it wasn't too bad, the surgery. It's not like having the plate inserted. So I wouldn't be surprised if he misses Mugello because of his foot, but we see him 2 weeks after that, whatever's, I mean, not at Mugello. So that's 3 weeks from now, because this week is Barcelona. Skip a week and then Mugello. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him there. Let's see. Time will tell.
Well, like I said, I think that'll be a big statement. I think, as you said, if he does come back there, it's right. Marc's feeling comfortable. He's happy. He's ready to tackle this, and he's carrying on. If we don't, again, the question marks are just going to be raised. Okay, Paul, that's pretty much Marc done and dusted. We're going to have to wait and see how that plays out. Everyone in the comments here is going absolutely crazy, obviously wanting to know more about Brad Binder, so we'll get on to that topic now. Sure, Paula. I want to try and be as diplomatic as I can about this as a fan and as a friend of Brad. It was great seeing Brad. I got to spend time with him on Thursday. He's always very accommodating. He finds time for me in his busy schedule. I got to hang out with him and Bjorn in the truck, went into the pit box, saw the team a little bit. Then, went to the Red Bull hospitality with him, had a fantastic dinner and conversation. Great. Loved it. Both as a fan, as a friend, it's what everyone could, it's what streams are made of, hanging out with Brad in that environment. So it was brilliant to see him. I haven't seen him since Silverstone really last year. So that was fantastic. And Bjorn at the same time. Then as the weekend, we kind of do that on Thursday because that's his only time. As the weekend goes on, it's just chaos. I think I saw him once or twice after that, and it was in the media debriefs. Other than that, you don't see him. It's just chaos. It's hard. I mean, the weekend actually started off pretty well for Brad. In the first session, he was like, 7,000ths of a second, and he would have gone up 4 positions inside the top 10.
Yeah.
In the Friday, in the practice session, which determined Q1 or Q2, he missed out on Q2 by like a 10th. Had he gone a 10th faster, he would have gone 3 positions up. Had he gone 2 tenths faster, he would have gone 6 positions up. Had he gone 3 tenths faster, he would have been second or something. It's those margins again that kill Brad. He's always missing out on that Q2 spot directly by a 10th or maximum 2. So anyway, but there was somewhat of a feeling there. I quickly saw him in between, and he was like, there's something here. One thing he did say to me on Thursday that I did ask him was, how was it working with Phil Marin? And he said, it's fantastic. Phil's brilliant. I love him. I tell him something, he makes a plan, he sticks to his plan, he trusts himself, he trusts us. He's brilliant. He's loving that. He loved his former crew chief, Andreas, so absolutely loved him and was gutted to lose him. But he said, Phil, the relationship's great, and he's absolutely loving it. So things were looking decent up until then, and then Saturday happened, and went into Q1, put his first set of tires in, got an okay lap, but wasn't really happy with it. One thing that I was told that I don't even know if I didn't know this. I don't know if you or anyone in the comments here actually knew this, but these MotoGP bikes have it's kind of like a, oh man, I don't know how to explain it, but it's almost like a cheat code. So they've got the ride out device that they activate that goes down as they come out of corners and it shoots them. They've got a second version of that takes the bike even lower into like the start position that really can shoot them off and find a 10th or 2. And a lot of the riders on their fast laps use that coming out of the final turn, activate that second ride out device, shoot them, but then you sacrifice. That thing stays locked all the way, literally until you like really have to deactivate it. So you can only use it really once. You can't use it all the time, but riders use that. So apparently in the Friday, Pedro Acosta very late on got in to Q2 ahead of Brad. I think he was 10th. Bastianini was 11th, Brad was 12th or something, but by like a 10th or 2 tenths. And it was purely because he used that device. Had Brad used that device like he was supposed to, and he just either forgot, or I don't know the reason why he didn't, but that would have been the 10th or 2 tenths that probably would have got him in. Probably could have, would have, should have. But anyway, it was very interesting for me to hear that they've got, I didn't know they had that like second application of the device available. But anyway, then Q1 happens, goes out first, kind of run, does okay, right, banking on his second tire now to do the job. And I was standing trackside, Paul, and when Brad came out in his first flyer, and I thought, just why is this guy doing 2 laps to warm up? Then he went again, geez, why is this guy doing 3? Because he was literally this warm-up pace. Like he couldn't turn the bike, he couldn't commit. I was, what is this guy doing? As a fan, you're kind of going, we've seen this before. Like, why is this guy going to miss out on Q2 again? If he's going on. And I only found out later that day in the debrief that he just had this dud rear tire. Apparently, 1 or 2 riders had it in practice sessions where these Michelins, it happens. You just get this tire that just doesn't work. You've done the heat cycles, you've done everything, tire pressure's right. They just do not work. And Brad had this, and I was just like, oh, for goodness sake, man! Like, you know what I mean? This is like the worst time for this to happen. Going through everything that he's going through, and then this happens. But anyway, qualifies second last. It's last. He still said it's last. Jonas Volk was a test driver. I was last, and he was the Saturday debrief after the sprint race, which he got a decent start, but you did the best with what you can do coming from last, and salvaged what would have been points in the main race, but in a sprint race ultimately means nothing, and just data gained. Great. Coming into the rider debrief, geez, Paul, again, as a friend more so than a fan, seeing our guy, like, just Brad's always this proud guy making the best out of every situation. It's always been his strength, even when times are hard. It's like, my team and I are working hard, go. And you could just see that this had really impacted him. I think with everything going on, what's going on, where's he going, what's he doing, this was another kick in the teeth that he didn't need. And it was horrible to see him that deflated. And he came in there and he just said, worst Saturday, horrible Saturday, useless. He used literally used the word useless. It's pathetic. And he was just blatantly honest and vomited out this like absolute disgust of a weekend so far, or of a Saturday for this tire. But it's typical Brad. Like, okay, well, some positives for Sunday. We got a bit of data, and let's try and make it work on Sunday. Sunday happens, and again made up a few spots. Good start. Got up actually into 12th place, then 11th place because Mir had crashed out, and then Brad tucks the front and down he goes. And I'm like, and he got a lift back on a 0 as well, came straight past me. But again, you could just see this dejected kind of in the debrief again, just dejected, said, I just went in the corner, broke a little bit later, a little bit more pressure on the front, and down it went. And it's just like, you know how it is when you're down in the dumps, you're down in the dumps. Yeah. That's the vibe I got from Brad this weekend. So my overall look at Brad on the weekend, watching him from trackside, even in the good moments where he was setting his decent pace, just looks like an uncertain rider, like an uncomfortable rider, where, and I compare Bastianini, Brad, and Pedro, where Pedro and Bastianini are more direct in how they ride the bike. They're like brake, bang, brake, bang. Brad has this, and it's marginal. You really have to know what you're looking for to see it, because you watch Brad out on track and you think, geez, this guy is setting lap record. That's how fast they all are. You look at Jonas Folger, who was 2 seconds pace, and you go, he's fast. To me, I can see that. Shame, he looks like a track day rider compared to how fast Martin and them are going. But to the natural, you look at him and you go, geez, this guy is super fast, but he's not 2 seconds off the pace. And 2 seconds to me and you is not a lot. If I'm 2 seconds slower than Sheridan or someone at a track day, yes, I'm happy. But in MotoGP, you go and you hide under a rock because you're miles off the pace, But Brad, there was this hesitancy. It wasn't this direct, I'm at one with my motorcycle, I feel confident. And it also got me thinking of what I think was your comment or one of our fans' comments, in the fact that as the evolution of the MotoGP bikes and the Michelin tires have gone, it's really hampered Brad's ability to be able to get the best out of his bike. We think of Brad, and I'm going to throw Jack Miller into this hat, because Jack also disaster over a weekend. God, just unhappy. Like, he came to the debrief on Sunday. It was only me and Simon Patterson. He's like, I'm not waiting for anyone else. We're doing this. I'm going. And he was very accommodating to us, but he was like, told Dorna, I'm not waiting for the other guys. I want to get out of here. And he was just miserable. Jack's normally got a little bit of miserable. But Jack and Brad have always had that similar riding style from Moto3 days, where they sideways, almost into the turn sideways to kind of square it and line up the corner that way, And if you look how they've both suffered as this evolution of the aero and especially the Michelin tires, it's you can't do that anymore. You look at the Foss guys, you look at that Aprilia. That Aprilia goes into that corner, straight line, not out of shape, and they can go boom, 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 boom. That direct that I talk about. Whereas, I think Jack and Brad are still wanting that. We want a little bit of feel. We want a little bit of movement. I don't like going into a corner straight. I was the same. I always had to go into a corner sideways. I couldn't go. If I went into a tight corner straight, like with the bike, not kind of sideways and lining up, I felt weird. I couldn't do it. And that's the hesitation that I'm seeing with Brad and with Jack, is that they're trying to get comfortable on this bike. This bike's going straight, and they're trying to I want you just to move, just to buckle and flex a little bit for me to line up the corner. Whereas Pedro, bang, Bastianini, bang, bang. So, And this leads me to my next point, and my final point before I'll catch up with comments and get your side, Paul, is for Brad's future. And this is where I really hope he can get a chance at next year's bike, with less aero and the Pirelli tires. Because I really think, and I'm not the only one, I spoke to a lot of people in that paddock, and a lot of them share the same sentiments with me. Looks like he's lost a little bit of fight purely because he doesn't feel comfortable on the bike. He's not that same Brad that, you might time up on the brakes and you couldn't pass him. There's this fragile Brad Binder there. But one thing we all kind of agreed on was put this guy on next year's rules, and we could see the return of, the Brad Binder that we know, the podium seeking, the challenging Brad Binder. Give him that chance. Now, is he going to get that chance? So I can tell you now, and I'll go through the rest of the confirmed seats for next year that are 100% confirmed, but are being waited by Liberty or whatever to be announced. They're waiting for the right times. Like, I got the message as I got to the race weekend that Alex Marquez will be present at the Red Bull Ring for a press conference. Red Bull Ring, KTM, Alex Marquez. They're going to announce him, the rider. Pedro Costa and Brad Binder will be present too, and I think DJ Antonio was as well. I can't remember it, but that news came later. But I kind of looked at it as, right, we're announcing Alex Marquez, and we're potentially saying thank you and goodbye to Pedro and Brad. That's how you can read things. I'm not saying that's how it is, but you look at this. Okay, so why would Alex, and this early on, why is Alex, Brad, and Pedro going to be in a special, a press conference at the Red Bull Ring? Unless Brad is to sign the news that he's signed with Tech 3 potentially. So this is the news on Brad. Tech 3 are definitely staying with KTM. The problem that was there was Gunther Steiner did not want to deal with Pit Barra. So I don't want to deal with the middleman. I want the top boys. Pit Barra obviously not happy about this because I am Mr. KTM Motorsport. That's where this happened. Gunther Steiner said, cool, if I can't talk to this guy, I'll take my team elsewhere. And this is where the Honda story came from. And it was like literally on the borderline of that happening. It's almost 100% confirmed that they will stay KTM. So that's the lifeline that Brad's got now, is that when they do stay KTM, Brad is a serious contender for one of those seats at least. The second seat was Danny Holgado. His lack of performances now have opened up other names. Senna Aegis and a whole bunch of other names have been thrown in there. But that's a potential seat there for Brad Binder. The other potential seat is the Trackhouse Aprilia one that we've heard the rumors. To be honest, I was hoping I would hear more of that in the paddock there, but it was more the other way of the Tech 3 story, and a little glimmer of hope with the Trackhouse, especially with the news that David Brivio is going from Trackhouse Aprilia to Honda. He's going to be an HRC consultant. Alberto Puig is leaving. I mean, don't have to be a rocket scientist to put the pieces of the puzzle together there. Then there's the Bastianini potentially taking a Trackhouse. So now Trackhouse have got two spots available. Raul Fernandez looks like he's going out. Ayagura is going to factory Yamaha. So there's two spots available. There's Bastianini up for grabs. There's Nicolo Bulliga up for grabs. There's Manuel Gonzalez up for grabs. There's Izan Guevara up for grabs. There's David Alonso up for grabs. Holgado up for grabs. There's so many riders up for grabs. And this is, again, at a performance level like this, it really impacted Brad this weekend with that performance. But what I was told by some very reliable sources is that Trackhouse don't like to take a fully European team. They like to have multinationals in there. So like this, they've got Raul Fernandez, but then they had Ayagura. So they don't want to have two Spanish or two Italian or Spanish and Italian. They like to have, an international kind of passport in there. And that's why the Brad Binder name was thrown in the hat, because decent rider, MotoGP experience, that different passport, I don't know if it's from a commercial point of view or how Trackhouse look at it, but that is it. But as I said, that conversation wasn't as loud as I was hoping it was going to be within the paddock there. It's there. There's still that glimmer, but the Tech 3 was very much the big talking point. So, yeah, the learnings are definitely not a happy man, our Brad Binder. It's horrible to see him like that. I hope he can bounce back. I hope they can find something for Catalunya this weekend. Honestly, it's going to be hard. It's, I just think Brad's bashing his head against a brick wall with the KTM, the Aero, the Michelin tires. I don't know if Brad's trying to get the same feeling he had 2 or 3 years ago when he was competitive on the KTM. And that's just not going to happen with a new tire and the new aerodynamics. I took the photos of Pedro and Brad's bike with the aero. They were terrible photos, but Paul, walking around the bikes, there's not much difference. Brad did confirm on the Saturday or the Friday, I can't remember, that yes, Pedro has had some of the updates from the Jerez test that should be getting now for Barcelona. But then on Sunday, he said they tried new aero for the Sunday race and a couple of other things, and it seemed to make him feel more comfortable and more happy on the bike, which was positive taking into Barcelona, but not positive in the fact that he crashed. So yeah, didn't see a comfortable rider on track. So a rider that's hesitant for whatever reason, whether it's the bike feeling, whether it's his mind, whether it's the uncomfortable truth of, am I going to be in MotoGP next year or not? And then in terms of the rumors, I would, if I had to bet on it now, I would bet that he would be staying with KTM in the Tech 3 stable. And I really hope that happens, because I think jumping on that new bike, the new rules, less aero, Pirelli tires, we can really see the best of Brad Binder again.
Yeah, Rob, I'm glad you say that, because you sound very positive. Because from my point of view, up until this weekend, so the 4 races we had before this, Brad Binder just was not mentioned, not at all. Besides the odd person saying, no, it doesn't look like he's going to have a ride, which to me, you want to be mentioned, because then people are talking about you. And sure, there's going to be negative and there's going to be positive. But my concern is everything I've seen after this weekend. One comment was from Neil Hodgson, who we've discussed it many times on the program. Brad's 1 lap pace for getting into Q2. We know how important it is. We've said we know it's something that he needs to work on, and I'm sure 100% he's doing his absolute best. Like you said, it's a 1/10 of a second here and it's a 1/10 of a second there. But it always seems to be a 1/10 of a second too little for Brad. So that's something we've discussed. How he rectifies that, I wouldn't have a clue. And I'm 100% sure he knows that that's something you have to improve it. We've discussed it a million times on the show. The other thing that I saw quite a bit of over the last 2 days and it's social media, and it doesn't mean it's fact, but people are saying Brad Binder looks dejected. Now, you were there. You would have seen, you would have chatted to him. You've got a personal relationship with him. I just think when the media are putting, and I don't know if these were journalists who are at the track. I don't know who these, what their context is. But it worries me to see people posting stuff from not a comment section, call it a press release, a media statement saying Brad doesn't look like the Brad of 6 months ago, a year ago. And I hear exactly what you're saying. To end up getting a dud Michelin tire, on a weekend where you can least afford it, just doesn't do your confidence any good. So it's a difficult one to answer, Rob. I'm so glad you say that KTM or Tech 3 are going to stay with KTM 99%, because I think that does open a door, because Gunther Steiner also said he doesn't want a rookie on the bike. So that means you're going to talk to someone like a Brad Binder. I don't think Bastianini will stay no matter what. So, that's a positive. I agree with you 100%. I would like to see Brad. We've also discussed it. I think the aero is what's holding him back. He can't adapt to the riding style required. We've said it. He's coming in sideways. The aero on the bike doesn't want that. It wants the bike to be upright or at a 60-degree angle. And he likes it upright and sideways. So I think there's a bit of a conflict of style versus aerodynamics versus bike improvements, if that's the right word. Certainly not for Brad. But going forward next year, everyone's seen the photos of, and that 60 mils, I think it's 60 mil difference is quite a big difference when you look at the photos next to each other. And I've seen the pictures of the Ducatis, the less aero, and obviously the Pirelli tires. So I think hopefully we see Brad there. Number one prize, obviously based on this year, would be if he could get into Trackhouse. But remember, next year's a brand new bike. It doesn't mean the Aprilia is going to be the Aprilia from this year. But certainly, I'm glad you feel positive that there is a space and his name's been bandied around, because on the outside, it sounded like he was the forgotten man. Rins, if nothing else, Rins knows his future is sealed. Brad's still in that position. What if? So I think, I'm glad to hear that. And let's just hold thumbs and hope that over the next couple of weekends he can have, be the best KTM or be right behind Pedro if he's not ahead of him. And let's see, hopefully that just tips him in favor of a Trackhouse if possible, or staying with Tech 3, which would obviously be fantastic for us to see Brad there for another season or two, because I agree with you, next year is going to be completely different. I think personally, with the lack of rider aids, it's going to make certainly your start is going to be critical, and it's going to make the bike more to the rider. As to right now, we've got electronics doing, I mean, you still got to ride the bike, and if you get it wrong, look what happened to Mark. But I think next year, Brad's a rider's rider. I think if you took all the electronics off, he'd be one of the top oaks immediately. So yeah, let's see. Hopefully he has got a seat to put his bum on for next year.
Yeah, it is. And, I think that, again, coming from the paddock, speaking to a lot of people with know-how within that ecosystem, is the Pirelli's the big thing. The Pirelli's the big thing. The Michelin is so driven by that front tire. It's so temperamental with temperature, with this and that and this and pressure. And then, like Jonas Folger was the perfect one in his debrief. He said that's the hardest thing. And we know Toprak has said it. The hardest thing to adjust to in MotoGP right now is the aerodynamics and everything, but it's the tire. Jonas Folger said it's amazing how much pressure that front end and load that front end can take. It's incredible. Yeah. But when it's gone, it's gone. And when it has no feel, it has no feel. There's no kind of counterbalance. It's that or that. And you said it's
on or off,
yeah. So you're on a package that's not 100% suited to it, like the KTMs, you can see they're going almost with their eyes closed, going, okay, is this Michelin going to grip? Yes, it has. Okay, cool, go. You can see Pedro starts with that feeling, and then he's got to kind of wind it down because that feeling is getting lost, and I'm either going to land on my head or I'm not. And we saw with Pecco Bagnaia. The Pecco Bagnaia was, I'll talk about it later, but it was also purely a little bit of difference between the tire temperature, the tire pressure, the tire temperature, because the conditions before the race started, and the fact that he was trying to stay at a pace when he had a little bit of a problem. So it's so temperamental, whereas the Pirellis, you know what's coming. Even in my history in riding Pirellis and World Superbikes, there's going to be a drop, but you know what that drop is, and you know how to manage that drop. When the tire starts doing that, you know how to control it and manage it. Whereas the Michelin, you just cannot do that unless your bike is 100% perfectly suited to it. And I was watching the paddock pass with Adam Wheeler, Dave Emmett, and Neil Morrison. I was watching that earlier, and Dave Emmett made the perfect point of, Aprilia. Obviously, Ducati set the bar, for the last couple of years. People say, "Oh, Ducati is over," and they've won the last 4 world championships or whatever. So, is it such a bad thing that we all wanted someone to take on?
Exactly.
Everyone's going, "Oh, Ducati." It's like, okay, well, now Aprilia. But what Aprilia have done right is they hired, this one Formula Ferrari F1 kind of guy, and they got Sterilini back, and they got this, and they put these pieces of the puzzle together, and they really focused, obviously, developing around the tire, and they've got the best package that works for the tire, the Michelin tires, and that's what's working. So you can see when you talk to some of the riders and some of the teams about this Pirelli next year, you can see they're excited. More they couldn't really care about the aero, and that's saving them money and a little bit of development and stuff. But the tire is the big thing. The likes of Toprak as well, licking his lips, kind of going, it would be nice to get to something a little bit more familiar. Because this is just so alien to him. It's incredible. I think Jack and the likes of Brad will, if they can stay on, will really benefit from these changes. So let's hope it is. But again, another name we haven't mentioned, Maverick Vinales, is still in line for a potential KTM or Tech 3 seat. So there's a couple of riders that could impact the decision of Brad, and it's going to be performance. If Brad can't have more Le Mans, as it was, and as good as we know Brad is, results speak for themselves. So you look at Daniel Garda, he was tipped, and he's going to be the next. Now he's had a couple of subpar performances. Look at Sergio Garcia all those years ago. Well, the next man didn't make it into MotoGP. Where's he now? Joe Roberts was going brilliant, and where's he now? You get forgotten very quickly in MotoGP.
Very quickly,
That's the biggest hindrance Brad's got. So. But it does sound good. It is positive, as you said. I came out of that, as hard as it was seeing Brad dejected and and with all that on his mind and playing that. Brad is still a strong personality, and I know and I trust that he'll bounce back. But I was very buoyed by the fact that it sounds very positive that we're going to see Brad in a seat next year, being able to give it another go, because I do think he's got unfinished business there.
Absolutely.
Paul, we're going to jump straight into, before we get into the actual race and Aprilia and stuff, just confirmed seats. So these are 100% confirmed seats that I can tell you are definitely happening for next year, confirmed in the paddock by everyone I spoke to. It's just a case of when they're going to be launched and how they're going to be launched. So Digia is in KTM alongside Alex Marquez. That is 100% signed, sealed, and delivered. And actually on Thursday, I think I put a Facebook post out on it on Motor Rider World. I actually saw Digi with one of the he's kind of like the contract lawyer dude that signs riders for KTM. And they were talking and all very handshaky and all looking very happy. And I kind of saw that. And I'm not one to kind of take photos and that I wanted to, but I was like, again, I felt like the outside kind of guy. Like you tread slowly because I don't know what you can and can't really do in MotoGP just yet. So anyway, that is confirmed. Alex Marquez is confirmed. That is the factory KTM team done. Tech 3, as I said, question mark. Brad Binder, question mark. Maverick Vinales, question mark. David Alonso, question mark. Danny Holgado, question mark. Anea Bastianini. There's a few options to explore there for Tech 3 KTM, but as your point, Günther Steiner wants an experienced rider in there. That's the Brad Binder quality. That's what's keeping Brad in there, and obviously his loyalty to the brand.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting one because we've seen this trick play out before. Jorge Martin to Yamaha is done. As I left the circuit, there is talk that Aprilia are going to now try, or I don't know if it's Aprilia or Martin, but there is conversation that potentially they're going to try salvage something there. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's just talk or whatever, but that's going to be a hard one to do because a Yamaha contract with the Japanese is a Yamaha contract. You know, that's kind of insane. But Karshaman back a year at Le Mans, Jorge Martin walked into Le Mans with a piece of paper saying, Aprilia, I'm gone. Here's your resignation letter. Goodbye. It didn't work out that way. A year later, and the guy wants to stay there. And we could be seeing Martin win another world championship and take the number one plate to another manufacturer. Yeah. That is a done deal from what's been said in the paddock and confirmed.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, Rob, because let's be quite honest. If he looks at and just on that point, Fabio Quartararo, to me, I know Martino's rider of the weekend, no doubt, but Quartararo on Sunday was next best in terms of where he finished and where the bike should be finishing. But now you look at Martin on a bike that I'm not going to say he can win with ease, but it certainly looks that way. And now he's going to go to a Yamaha that is, you know, even if he gets a result as good as Quartararo, and it'll take him a while to get there, at best, he's going to be finishing 6th, 7th, and 8th. So I don't know. So I was wondering about that this weekend. What are the chances that they can reverse that? Now, this is him and his management team shooting themselves in the foot. Because like you say, exactly to the race weekend a year ago, he walked in, and told Aprilia he was done with them. He wasn't even going to carry on. And Massimo Rivolo said, not a chance, boy. We've got a contract. Now Martin is saying, oh, thank heavens he said that to me. So he's done an about face because things have worked out in his favor. Whether if there's a lock-in clause, Yamaha are going to stick to that 100%. So I can't see that happening, but certainly he must be having nightmares about that, Martin. How's he going to reverse this? How's he going to, to himself? I don't know. So it's going to be a very strange one. But I agree with your sentiment. 90% chance he's going to win the championship. Never say never, but the way he's riding at the moment, let's just say he wins it. What's he going to do? Take the number one plate to Yamaha? That's not going to be, Aprilia are not going to be happy with that at all. Look, they've all spent in love and war. They signed a 2-year deal with him, but he was very quick to want to jump ship. And yeah, it's a tough decision for all parties. The fact that Aprilia embraced him 100% after the way he carried on last year, I'm going to say big ups to Rivolo. He clearly knows he's learned. He didn't do very well, I still say, with Maverick and Espargaro. They had many issues that I would have dealt with differently if I was in that situation. But it seems like they've got this team to gel. It's working. I mean, they got the 2 fastest riders on the best bike, and it's working at the moment. So yeah, I just think that Martin must be ruining that little bit of, what's the right word, off the cuff impulsiveness. I deserve and I want and I might have just shot himself in the foot. But saying that, he's not worried about next year. You can tell he's focused. He's so focused now. And that was one thing when he beat Pecco 2 years ago. There were times where you just saw him in that pit box and pit box, pit bull. Same thing, boy. That he is intense. You can see when he's on it. Yeah, it's difficult to beat him, So it's going to be interesting. It's really going to be interesting. My heart says I just hope Bezecchi wins it, because what he did last year at the end of the year and what he's done for Aprilia. But I think he's going to have his hands full fighting against the Oku. When you see the fire that he had this weekend, and to do what he did, 8th to 1st, that just, Martin's the kind of guy, he feeds off that positivity. It just makes him feel like he's invincible, the Martinator. And I think everyone is going to have their hands full. You got to bring your A+ game if you want to beat this guy. And obviously no one's going to win week in and week out, but he's going to do what he did the year he beat Pecco. He's going to be racking up the points, and it's going to make him very dangerous.
Absolutely. Stuart McLeod, nice comment here from him, multiple South African champion. Yeah, one of South Africa's top motorcycle racers ever. So thank you so much, Stewie, for joining us and for the comments. Michelin tires have always been like that. I remember from our GP 250 days, same problem. So yeah, very one-directional. So great comment there from Stuart McLeod. Thank you for that.
Let me just tell you that Stuart McLeod is now a top cyclist. Yeah, he can ride a bike like a manier.
Oh, really?
He's proper. Yeah, he's proper. Yeah.
Does he also cycle from the East Rand to Dubai or whatever?
He lives in Krugersdorp, so they probably go to London or somewhere silly like
he's closer to Dubai.
Yeah.
And yeah, I believe he is a good cyclist. So that's just, I don't know why I don't know. God invented engines for a reason. Grant Farrell makes a good point, Jan. Paul. Hey, Rob, did you notice how well the WP suspension is performing in the top 4 bikes in the Moto2? And I promise you, walking down, so I get a pit lane pass for Friday as a one event media pass guy. Only when you're full-time media do you get a pit pass for wherever you want to go. But as a one event, you get a pit pass for the Moto3 and Moto2 sessions only on Friday. So I took a walk, and it's nice because the MotoGP bikes still come up and warm up, while Moto2's on there. But I actually walked down the paddock in Moto2, and I went, and it just struck me then, like we always talk about WP and how, we think I think it's one of the reasons why KTM do battle in MotoGP. Then I looked at it and I went, yes, a lot of Moto2 teams run WP suspension, and they work there. Moto3, they all ran WP suspension just about, other than the Jap bikes. And it works in those lower categories. Then it clicked to me the exact same, like kind of what he's saying is, it works in that category with less aero, less things on Pirelli tires.
Yeah.
So could this next year move be the move that KTM needs to really kick off their MotoGP kind of charge and challenge? So very good point there from Grant. And Grant, you're absolutely right. There's still a little bit of inconsistencies with some of those WP teams. If you look at like the CF Moto team, for instance, David Alonso, and one race they dominating, Holgado will clear off, and Alonso is on, and next race he's struggling a bit. So the WP also has a little bit of inconsistency, a little bit temperamental compared to Olin's, which is a little bit more direct and again just more consistent. But exactly that note there, I saw that comparison and I went, okay, that's also really interesting for next year. WP and Pirelli seem to work a lot better.
Yeah, funnily enough, I thought exactly the same watching Manu Gonzalez, because he's also WP. And I was just thinking how planted his bike looks. But also, then you've got the different chassis. So MotoGP, everyone's got their own chassis. Moto2, you really only got the makeup of 2 chassis. So I think that's why you see one weekend maybe the one chassis adapts better to the circuit than the other one. But certainly your point is valid. And I still think it's a limiting factor to KTM. I've said it for a long time. But as the aero has progressed, maybe the Öhlins has been able to, I'm going to use the word absorb, that's what suspension does, but absorb those changes better than WP. And maybe the regress in terms of aero next year will benefit them and the tires. So let's hope. There's a lot of positivity coming out of KTM. I hope it only is positive if Brad Binder's still on the bike. So, but let's see. There's so much is going to change next year. Obviously, we'll deal with it next year. But this year we got a lot of things that need to be addressed in terms of like the KTM. What do they do to they can't, you know, they can't keep using the tires as an excuse. I don't know. Pedro seems to be able to override the problem if it is a problem, unless and Brad's not the first guy to say I got a dud tire. So it's this inconsistency at that level shouldn't be happening. One dud tire in a season, yes, but it seems to be every weekend you hear of a rider who says, yes, I put that tire on. I mean, Pecco's had probably in the last 10 races, he's probably at 4. Now is that the excuse or is it genuine? I believe, there must be something to it. So I don't know. I just think at that level shouldn't be happening. These tires are handmade. Get the same out to make every tire then. Don't have 5 different guys, because that's where the discrepancy will come. So a little bit disappointing, but certainly something to look forward to for next year, but we've still got to get through this year.
Tulani's got a question about, is it true that CF Motor are keen on being in the paddock next season? So Tulani, I can also pretty much confirm, with Tech 3 potentially going with Honda, that CF Motor conversation was kind of brought forward. They were only looking at coming into the paddock in 2028. But because KTM were desperate to then have 2 extra bikes, CF Motor were going to come in with branded CF Motor KTMs. So you'd have 2 more KTMs on the grid. That conversation seems to have changed now that Tech 3 is staying with KTM. Obviously, the 2 spots that are available are the vacant Suzuki spots from all those years ago, which Dorna still hold. And the latest story is CF Motor are quite happy to kind of delay that now, because some involvement from Dorna. Dorna are kind of telling them what they need to do to have those spots. And CF Motor are going, well, if you're going to tell us to do, we'll just wait. Thanks. Which rider to have and all these kind of things. So that conversation that was looking very likely that they were going to join next year seems to have calmed down a bit, and it looks like it's going back to 2028. So yeah, we'll wait and see. One of the key points to that is that Dorna want David Alonso to stay with CF Moto if they come up into the MotoGP category, and the CF Moto to keep that continuity and that kind of brand. But at the moment, David Alonso is going to Factory Honda alongside Fabio Quartararo. Fabio Quartararo is 100% confirmed. He is going to HRC. That is a done deal. I can guarantee you that. David Alonso, it's from the sounds of it, is a 90% done deal. Ayagura to Yamaha alongside Martin is a done deal. That is the factory Yamaha team. Jorge Martin and Ayagura, if the Martin thing still sticks. I've said Digi, I've said Alex Marquez. Pecco Bagnaia will replace Jorge Martin at Aprilia. That is
on a 4-year deal.
On a 4-year deal, that is 100% done. That is guaranteed. Fabio to Honda. Then the rumors is Moto2 race winner from Le Mans, Izan Guevara, will go to Pramac alongside Toprak Razgatlioglu. So Jack Miller will be out. Or Senna Aegis into that spot, because Dorna would like to have an Australian passport still in the paddock. So Senna Aegis, on his form, winning the previous 2 Moto2 races, and his form has put his name in the hat. And like these are the kind of things that I was worried about that were just pushing Brad down the line. These performances. Manu Gonzalez, after the Moto2 race, he was asked, there's very little talk of you going to MotoGP. Does that irritate you? And you could see he kind of had to he wanted to say, yes, of course it does. I belong in MotoGP. This is bullshit type thing. But he had to kind of refrain and say, my focus is on Moto2 at the moment, but I do feel like I've done enough to be in MotoGP. The same question was asked to Izan Guevara. So a lot of talk, you're going to MotoGP. What can you tell us? Said, my full focus is on Moto2 at the moment. I've had nothing spoken about or mentioned. And then I think it was Adam Wheeler said, but do you think you're ready for MotoGP, or do you think you need another year in Moto2? And he said, no, I feel like I'm ready for MotoGP. So, those kind of things that you don't see from the outside.
Yeah, it just surprised me that they're throwing Guevara's name around ahead of Gonzalez. Gonzalez, he had a great season last year until after he tested the Trackhouse bike. Then I don't know if it was a mental thing, he fell apart and he got beaten to the championship, which I think should never have happened. But this year he's been consistent. He's leading the championship. Yet from what you're saying, he seems to, even though he's that talented, he seems to be the forgotten kid of Moto2. And other names are being bandied about, yet he's beating these guys. How does he come across as a person? Because in the paddock, he looks like a very quiet, reserved, I don't want to say introvert, I don't know him at all, but he certainly doesn't look like a guy that is in your face. Where you look at David Alonso, he's chirpy. He looks like he's a little bit more of a live wire, which shouldn't be make any difference. It's your riding that counts. But nowadays, the press interviews and the publicity stuff that you have to do certainly plays a part. Do you think that's something that detracts from Manu Gonzalez? Because to me, I just wonder why this kid led most of last year's Moto2. He's leading now, yet Guevara's name's being bandied about. And, and I'm not worried about David Alonso or Helgado. Alonso, certainly, I think he deserves to be in MotoGP. He is that talented. But now what about Gonzalez? He's beating though. Come on, So I'm a bit confused. Well, how does he come across? What do you think the reason could be?
Paul, I had that exact same sentiment, and the dealings that I've had with Gonzalez, nice enough guy, whatever, but he's got a little bit of Aaron Canet's disease, if I can call it that. They very my crap don't stink. I'm saying that just from what I see. I look at, you tested the Trackhouse bike last year. You were really fast. You were competitive in Moto2. Again, exactly what you're saying. Why not? And why are you being overlooked? And the only thing can be down to probably personality, probably to this. He's probably got this, I want this and I want this and I want this. He's cocksure. He's very confident about himself, which you need to be and you need to have. But again, behind closed doors, how is he sitting opposite a manager? Is he, no, I want this, I want that? I mean, how did it fall? It looked like he was a guaranteed rider. He was fast on done a MotoGP test. He's tested the MotoGP bike. He was good. And again, like you said, and that's why the question was asked, like, how do you feel that you, and I could see his answer. He wanted to go, it's utter bullshit that I'm not, but he refrained himself and did the political correct thing and said, whatever. But I think it could be down to a personality clash. Look, Guevara, because he's in a current Pramac team, that makes, they know his principle, they know his riding style, they know his data in many ways, they know him. He's a former Moto3 world champion. He's he's got, 3 seasons or 4 seasons under his belt in Moto2. He's finally clicked with it. So that makes sense. But I agree with you. A lot of people in the paddock agree that, Manuel Gonzalez, whether he's, excuse the word, whether he's a prick or not, you hire a guy for what he does on the track and the results that he makes. He's well worthy of a MotoGP ride. So let's see. Chris the Vet has a question here. How close do you guys think the competitiveness of the 850s will be to the current bikes? How is the manufacturer standings going to change? So, Chris, honestly, I think it's going to be a lot closer. Even Martin going to Yamaha, again, this Pirelli conversation, I think, is going to level out the playing field. I don't think Yamaha are going to be as far behind. Yamaha are still struggling with, from what Fabio has said, and I'll go through each rider a little bit later, a quick little detail on what I kind of, some of the key points I picked from each rider. But the biggest argument from Fabio on Yamaha is the electronics. It's just not kind of feeding the power right. It's holding back, and electronics and aero seem to be the 2 biggest things there. The engine has the potential. It's unlocking or delivering that potential in the right way. Aprilia will be there. Ducati will be there purely on the fact of their data with Pirelli tires. And when I say that, Ducati and Aprilia have been partnered with Pirelli with their superbikes and everything for years and years and years and years. They've got data on superbikes. They've got data on road bikes. So they know how Pirellis work. So they are going to be fast. And you're not going to go from where you are now and just, not be competitive. They are going to be the front runners and competitive. I think Honda are going to be brought back. I think it's going to be a much closer story. I personally feel I could be completely wrong, but I think that Pirelli is going to be the leveler because it's a more consistent, more balanced tire compared to the Michelin. As I said, probably the biggest taking I took out of this weekend was how Michelin manipulates a lot of the results that you're seeing. Yes, Bezzecchi and Martin are phenomenal talents in that, but the Pecos and the Marks and the Brads and that are much better than what they are showing, purely because the Michelin is the one key factor kind of holding them in. Aprilia have got the best package on those Michelins. That is why you're seeing these results. That is why Iagura, take nothing away from Iagura, fantastic superb rider. I saw this weekend a mature guy that is set for greatness. But is he that much better than Pedro Acosta? Is he that much better than Brad Binder? No. Is he that much better than Jack Miller or Toprak? No.
Yeah.
But he's on this bike that is with the Michelins that is letting him show his true potential, while the others are holding back because of this tire and is fighting the bike. And so, Chris, simple answer, yes, I think it's going to be a lot closer.
Yeah, Robin, was there not a test this week or last week with Michele Pero rode the bike? Was it at Mugello? And he was 3 seconds a lap off the pace.
Yeah,
Bulliga. Bulliga. Yeah, 3 seconds a lap, for I'm going to say a first outing. It's not a first outing, but kind of an official outing. Everyone will think, 3 seconds is a big gap. But we've always said for a rookie to get on a MotoGP bike at the first test at the end of the season, if you're within 3 seconds, you've done okay. He's got nothing to compare it with. In that, on that day, it would have just been Bulliga on the bike, where a rookie going out and testing at the first test after the season, he's got every other MotoGP bike on the track. He's got people he can follow. Yeah. Here was Bulliga on his own. So, 3 seconds, it's massive in terms of if you just took it as a number, 147 versus a 143 or 44, you'll get lapped in a 20-lap race. But put the other bikes on the grid where he's got someone to watch, and I think the gap is closer than people are expecting. And once the top guys are settled and get a month or two on the tires, I think it's going to be pretty close to what we've seen this year in terms of probably a second off the pace for the first year on the 850. So I think it's going to be really close.
Oh, yeah, I fully agree with you. Speaking of Nicola Bulliga, dominating World Superbikes, unbeaten 12 in a row now or something, just dominating. Big talk of will he make it to the MotoGP paddock or not? The story is Frankie Morbidelli is definitely out. I'll talk about him a little bit later. I'll go through each rider, but Morbidelli's out. Di Gianantonio's leaving VR46, so there's two potential spots there. Luca Marini and Bulliga.
No, isn't Furman going there?
Yes, so Furman Aldeguer. Well, yes and no. I mean, it's if I had to put a percentage on it, it's 80. I would say 80%. Furman Aldeguer.
Not a damn deal, eh?
Well, not from what I heard. Again, things Grassini want a rider. They want a name. We're handing VR4. This is where their argument with Ducati's coming in. Is like, well, hang on, why are you taking our best asset? If we're going to get David Alonso or rookie, we want a Furman Aldeguer, third season, ready to go. I'll talk about Furman Aldeguer later. Damaged goods at the moment, but we want a rider. Who are we going to be left with then if you're taking everyone? But yeah, he's touted for the 1VR46 seat, almost pretty sure, and then the second seat will be battled out between Luca Marini and Nicola Bulliga. Now Marini, obviously with David Brivio coming to Honda, that's kind of going to throw a couple of curveballs in there, because Brivio, is he going to be the decision maker now on who gets those seats? There's obviously 4 Honda seats available. Well, there's 2 really, because Fabio Quartararo has signed, Diego Moreira has signed, and sorry, there's 1 seat probably. Zarco, I think, has signed. Yeah. So there's 1 seat available there. Now, Joan Mir, still a lot of talk that he could land up at Trackhouse, but was that Brivio driven with their relationship from Suzuki all those years ago? Yeah. There was still talk of that, but again, not as much as the Trackhouse one was very clear. There's no kind of defined direction that they're taking in the rider market, other than potentially Binder, potentially Mir, potentially Bastianini, potentially these kind of names, or potentially a Gonzalez, or whatever. But yeah, VR46, that's them pretty much done. And then Grassini is again potentially Furman Aldeguer, potentially Bastianini, potentially David Alonso. Although I think he's pretty much gone to HRC. That'll be a big money contract. Could that be Gonzalez is into MotoGP? Senna Aegis. So Grassini and Trackhouse are probably the biggest question marks so far going into next year, whereas a lot of the others are pretty much confirmed. Just looking at this comment from Ryan Smith, any possibility that GP will come to Kalami? Ryan, as I mentioned earlier, looking at Le Mans and a lot of the other circuits around the world, Kalami's got a lot to do if they want to be able to host a MotoGP the right way. They can do it potentially like a Silverstone, where it doesn't have the atmosphere. It's very corporate. There's not enough, it just doesn't have it. Kalami's worry for me is the space. If I look at like Le Mans and the others, you have to have a massive fan zone section. You've got to have massive parking for fans, bikes, cars, trucks, riders, teams. You've got to have pits for Moto2, Moto3, MotoGP. You've got to have hospitalities for all these teams. Each team has a hospitality. You've got to be catered to that. You've got to have access roads to be able to get a bike from anywhere. If you crash up at Westbank or Luke or whatever it's called now, how the hell are you going to get that bike down? A gravel road, throw it down the gravel road to the bottom of the hill. Do me a favor. Le Mans has got tunnels under the circuit, access points. Kalami's, unfortunately, it's a fantastic circuit. I love Kalami. It's brilliant. It's nowhere near up to the spec of MotoGP. I can tell you that right now. Just see if there's any comments here, Paul, that I want to catch up with. Michael Fullion, how's Acosta not taking the taunt from Digi too well? We need some rivalry in MotoGP. Yeah. I mean, Acosta, it was a tongue-in-cheek joke kind of thing, but you could see there was a seriousness when Acosta mentioned it, like, no one passes me, and then looks back at it. Acosta, I mean, I'll talk about Acosta now quickly. Oh man, I love his debriefs. He kind of comes in there with a can of Red Bull, his glasses on his head, like this real hillbilly, like, hello guys. Whether he's at a cock race, a good race, hello guys. And he stands there. And the worst thing that can happen as an English journalist is if we're in you're in a tiny room, you're in a 4 meter by 4 meter room, no air conditioning, nothing. So sweaty journalists and God, Paul, I stood behind some very European guys, and I was like, wow. But you stand there, so you're talking to, let's say, Brad for his or Bastianini for his English debrief, and then you've got Acosta literally 2 steps behind you with the Spanish media. You have no chance in hell in hearing this poor Bastianini talk, because these guys are just they are just so animated and loud, and you see all the other journalists just going like shh, shh. Like, it's quite comical in many ways, but that's Acosta. He comes in there, and even with the English guys, goes, right, so what are we going to talk about? So we say, how was your race? Yeah, well, it was this, and effing 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 this. Then his sunglasses fall off, and he flicks them down, and he picks them up. And and his English is quite good, but then he goes, and man, what's the word? What's the effing word I'm looking for? Effing. Then someone goes, oh, yeah. And then at the end of it, he says, okay, goodbye, guys. Safe travel. See you next week in Barcelona. Don't do anything stupid. He's just this and
charismatic kid.
Very charismatic. And if I was speaking to Neil Morrison about Marc Marquez, and if he had to leave, that could be so bad for MotoGP, because I saw it again this weekend, even when we were in Le Mans. This Marc Marquez has this massive footprint in Moto. He is MotoGP in many ways. What are we going to do if we lose him? It's like back to the Rossi, where you're going to have 2 or 3 years of trying to recover from losing this legend. Then I looked at Pedro Acosta and I went, we're going to be absolutely fine. We're going to be absolutely fine. We've got David Alonso also potentially coming. He's got some charisma to him, so it's going to be fine. But Michael Fullion, I think we are going to see if an opportunity presents itself that Acosta could make a similar move to Digi Antonio at the right time. Knowing Pedro Acosta, he's going to look back just on purpose to kind of say, there you go, how does it feel, type thing. So, those kind of, it is cool. Even Marc Marquez and Digi, we saw it a little bit again in the one qualifying session where, Mark saw Digi let him go and then turned in on him, and both make nothing of it, but there's just
but there's that little niggle. And my take on that was Digi passed him. It was a forceful pass. It wasn't a dodgy pass. And I think when he came out, that it's like almost like a double right hand. I know it's 2 corners. When he came out of that, I think he knew he had such good drive out of the corner. That's what it looked like. I think he was just making 100% sure that in that 300 meters to the line, Pedro couldn't get past him. So I don't know if that's my take on it. I don't know. And, I'm a Digi fan. So I don't know if it was an arrogant thing or if he was just making sure that his 4th place was secure. That's to me what it seems like. But I'm just going to say this DG kid has made me very proud, because when all around him are falling off, and yes, he hasn't won anything, and he's had a couple of poles, but he's doing exactly what he needs to do. So, I've always said I like him. There's something about him. There's just something about him that he looks like that kind of guy that he's having fun. Yes, I know we've said that in the past. He didn't look like it when he had contract issues, but he's got to that point now where that self-belief has stepped up to be part of him. It's not something that he has to sit down every Thursday afternoon and say, okay, now I believe I'm going to win. It seems like it's now just become a part of him. And that seems to be his demeanor. And I see quite a lot of him on social media. He seems like a happy guy. And to me, when you look at these MotoGP riders, you can almost instantly see how they've been performing. I see very little of Alex Marquez all of a sudden, because it's not the Alex of last year. This is the Alex Marquez of 2 seasons ago. And now he's not in your face, because he's not in a space that he's comfortable with. So, it's very important. As much as we've said it a billion times, the mental game is equally as important as the physical and the machine. And Digi, to me, just looks like he's in a good space. And I'm glad to hear you say the same about Pedro Acosta, because that means as much as they've got challenges and these two Aprilias that are giving them a proper hiding, in their head, they're saying, okay, well, we're doing the best that we can do. And, it's going to work. When you're having those self-doubts, then you start, the bike's not good enough, I'm not good enough, where those two guys specifically seem to be, as much as they're not beating the Aprilias, they just seem to be, we're in this fight and we're having a good time. That's what it looks like to me.
And Pedro Acosta, another thing, he was asked, like, we've spoken to Digi and a couple of other guys, and they say following those Aprilias is that Aprilia front end is just so good. It's brilliant. What do you have to say about that? And Pedro went, yeah, it is, but so is Ducati's. Like just those little digs, like,
yeah.
What are they complaining about?
What are you moaning about? Come ride my bike.
So like those little things, and you can kind of see what he means. But he's a great character to have in MotoGP, Pedro Acosta, and it is. I feel that if Marquez calls it now, or when he eventually does, Pedro Acosta is that next kind of. I don't think it'll quite reach the level, of Mark and a Valentino Rossi, certainly, but I think he won't be far behind. Yeah. Talking about Digi, Paul, I can tell you exactly what you've just said. As I said, when you see them face to face, the body language and the expression just tell you where they are in life. Mark, I just started the show with that. I could see there was before the accident even happened, there was a down, depressed, not depressed, but just deflated rider. Brad Binder deflated. Jack Miller. Oh, I've never seen Jack like that. He was livid. But Digi, just comes in like the leading Ducati rider. Like, don't worry, Ducati, I've got this. I'll carry you. I know what I'm doing. And I still asked him the question. I said, Digi, a couple of years ago, you were going to be out of MotoGP mentally. You've had these mental health issues with motorcycle racing. How good is it coming into race weekends, knowing now that you're going to compete? You're going to be one of the top guys. And he just said, it's fantastic. I love it. It's been blood, sweat, and tears. I've had to work probably harder than anyone else to get here. It hasn't just come. And he says, I know a lot of people just think I'm lucky and I've got here. It hasn't. I've had to work harder. My MotoGP career has been on the line more than anyone else in this paddock. And, to stand here and be the top Ducati rider is a very proud moment for me, and so it should be, because again, he's also he's a very methodical rider. He also comes in very much like Luca Marini, and he's very precise in what he says. Like this weekend, he actually he said he was still suffering from a left shoulder injury, which he was battling to do those fast movements that Lamar, you're always kind of moving on the bike, and he said he battled a little bit. That didn't use it as an excuse, just said was a little bit niggly, but I've got a good physio and he helps me out. But nothing but positive things to say about the Ducati. He says, we're not that bad. We're good. We're not that far off. Yes, the Aprilia is just better, but we're not as bad as we think. We're making progress every time. It's about us managing our expectations. Like in that race again, Digi maybe a couple of years ago would have gone balls to the wall from the start and then either crashed or just dropped. This time it was methodical. Okay, be patient at the start, build your way into the race, and then make that move. And I think Pedro, looking at that move, I think Pedro was more upset with himself
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he had his pants pulled down.
Yeah, for sure.
Digi came from miles back, and
Yeah.
everyone knows Lamar last corners.
Yeah. Yeah.
You defend. If you know someone's on your, you defend. And Pedro left the wide gap there, and Digi passed him, didn't even run wide. So, I think it's more of that. But yeah, Digi Antonio throughout the whole weekend was good. Sprint race crashed right in front of me where I was standing in that first sector, to be honest. But again, no complaints, and it is exactly what you said, Paul. You can see it by social media and everything, and I saw it firsthand there. Happy to see the fans. Fans were screaming up him up there. He would walk up the stairs through the gate and do it. Just a happy man, happy to be in that environment, happy with his bike, happy with everything, and it's showing in his results. So after this couple of years ago where it was publicly announced, the mental health issues and
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
the guy where he is.
Yeah.
I want to talk. Okay. Now I'm going to quickly go through some of the results, just talk about some of the riders. We've touched upon most of them, but we could talk about it. We'll start with Jorge Martin. Geez, Paul, you hit the nail on the head earlier, that pit bull in the pits, and this people are already talking about it's Bezzecchi versus Martin in the championship. And you've got to kind of put Martin ahead because he's done it. He's tasted it.
Yeah.
He knows what it takes to do it, whereas Bezzecchi's still trying to find it. But I looked at Martin this weekend. That Sunday ride is the best Martin I've seen in MotoGP, and we've seen a lot of good Martin. But even that sprint race, that start, the way he attacked,
Unreal.
He's on another level. Even on Friday, and I was so surprised on Friday and even in Saturday with the qualifying, watching Martin out on track, I was like, this guy must be leading by 10 seconds.
Yeah.
This guy has to be. The first couple of laps, or the majority of the session on Friday, I watched at corners where there was no screen. So I had no visibility of who was where. But I was watching going, right, Martin must be 10 seconds ahead of everyone else, and this guy and this guy and this guy. And I went and Martin Friday and Saturday was kind of there, but not what we saw on Sunday. So I was like, okay, but he looks so good out on track. And it was clearly just this guy building, and then striking when it counted, in the race.
Yeah.
And even, again, the press debriefs and that, even on the Friday and Saturday when it wasn't going 100% to plan, he was like, don't worry, like, just this cocksure, like, I'll hold my beer, watch this move. You know what I mean? Really, I looked at him on Sunday and I went, how the hell is anyone going to beat this guy? If that player is that good, and he is that good, and he is that good. I mean, you even saw with his team, cast your mind back to when he wanted to leave and whatever. Now he's coming into the pits. The Oaks are dropping his bike on him and doing all and he's going up and he's hugging them and he's laughing and he's smiling. There's just a happy guy there. The guy is just, I look at that and I go, my God, if he won that year on the Ducati with Pecco on him, which was a hard year, but he pulled it off very much through consistency, which I think he's going to be this year. But I think there's going to be a lot more dominant race wins coming from Martin because, man, he's just got everything. That, like I said, that look in his eye is just that pit bull. That, right, bring it. Just bring it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the one rider that those facial expressions, and we see it on all of them, but him, and I'm sure a lot of people will agree, he just looks ultra focused. And Bezzecchi did come out and say in his interview after, on his podium interview, that he just didn't feel comfortable on Sunday. He didn't make any excuses. Whether he had a slightly dud tire, I don't know, but he certainly, Bezzecchi still comes across to me as yes, I'm enjoying this and this is lacquer and we'll do as well as we can while the going's good. Where Martin has changed his focus now, he's now said, okay, well, now I'm going to win this championship. And I don't know if Bezzecchi, even though he won the first 3 races comfortably, led every race, every lap. I don't know if in his head he believed he was going to win the championship. That's been my concern. And it's my concern with Martin, and I voiced it. End of 24, he won the championship. Then 25, he started off with such bad crash, big injuries. Came back last year, didn't really perform. Let's be quite honest.
Yeah.
In my head, and I think I even mentioned it on the show, I was wondering, has he said, okay, I've achieved everything I needed to achieve?
Yes.
And I'm done. So now, kind of like a Damon Hill in Formula One, or, they've done it once and they kind of got lucky and let's move on from here. The Martin I saw this weekend is the Martin of 2023, where we argued and said, listen, this oak must just come down off his high horse a little bit. This was the Martin who was nobody, his mindset is nobody can beat me. Not nobody's going to beat me. He just says nobody can beat me. And he's deadly. He, in this mood, he is absolutely deadly. So, and he's got a bike that he's comfortable with. He won't, and I'm saying this for someone who is not a big Martin fan, and I think he's had mental fragility. He's now at a space where the Yamaha contract, his future means nothing. He's going to go week to week to week to week and just try and build up as much of a points lead, commit so much pressure on the other riders that it makes his job easier. I think that's what we're going to see. Let's see this weekend how Bezecchi can respond. Because as far as I'm concerned, he's the only oak at the moment with a real chance of responding, that in the sense that we saw it, he's got to get ahead, get a big gap and hold it, which he couldn't do on Sunday. So I think it's going to give Massimo Rivola more grey hairs or some grey hairs, but for us to watch, it's going to be enthralling.
Yeah, it is. It's turning out to be a great spectacle between both riders because, both great comment here from Brunk Heinemann saying, Martin has grown up. Same with here, comment about Bezecchi. I saw that both. Bezecchi, I see a championship contender now. I see this mature guy standing there, also confident in himself, but with his feet on the ground. And I think that's exactly what you've pointed out there. If I look at it now, both are mature, both are ready to go for this championship. But Martin almost, Bezecchi's got his feet a bit more on the ground, which is good. But when you're so cocksure of yourself, like you just said, he knows he can win. Martin, it's not the case, can you beat me? As you won't beat me. And that's where he's just got that little edge. It's that personality, it's that cutthroat, it's almost that Spanish that the Spanish are just born with it. These guys, they just have that killer instinct in them. And Martin's again proven to himself, I think exactly what you said, Paul. I think last year it got to a point I also questioned whether, right, this is one hit wonder, we've seen the story play out, this guy's just gonna kind of fizzle by the wayside type thing. And for Martin to come back, hats off to him. He's also had his injury problems, and he's been at the bottom of the barrel, and he's had to fight and claw his way here. And then you look at him now and you go, what is his weakness? Before we could say, right, throws his toys out the cot, spends too much time with Alicia Spargo. We said it was the Spargo syndrome. Yeah. There's none of that now. Yeah. There's Martin that's there. I don't know if he surrounded himself with different people, or if it's just a case of him growing up and being mature. I think the Aprilia whole situation, and I think Rivola needs to take a lot of credit for this, with how he managed it and how they put it all in and dealt with it. And I think that forced Martin in some ways to grow up. Like, no, you ask for vegetables on your plate, you're going to eat those vegetables. Like, you know what I mean? Almost his father figure to really, he's got his father there, of course, but his father's the right-hand man. And sometimes you need that outside person to say, no, you spoiled little brat. That's not how life works, bud. This is how life works. And you are going to dig deep. You signed a contract. You committed to us, and we want that commitment. And you almost clicked, and it's it's worked now. And I did. I mean, the biggest thing, Paul, I saw on all the Aprilias, to be honest, the Aprilias at one point were very twitchy. They were fast, but they were twitchy and unstable. If you cast your mind back to the beginning of last year with Bezecchi, from the side of the track, where they come out at one, I think it's turn 4 or 5, where Brad crashed, Mia crashed. It's a downhill. That's another thing about Lamar. You cannot believe the undulation. TV means nothing.
It looks flat.
You come out of that turn 1 and 2, which is the fast right-hander. It goes up. I mean, you go up, eh? That's why I said I'm so happy I had a scooter, because I wouldn't feel my calves. I'd need yours or Stuart's calves to be able to do that. But it goes up like this, and then you bend, and then you go through that turn 1, turn 2, then it goes, then you barrel down, eh? I go down on that scooter, and there's gravel on the access road, and I go down there with a back brake, and it's like, you go down, and then you come up and over a crest. I couldn't believe the undulation. Anyway, they come out of there, and like a lot of the other bikes, especially the KTMs, they sit, and then the back just pumps a bit, which then, there's a little bit of movement, not a lot, but a little bit. The Ducatis were settled, a little bit, tiny little bit of movement. Those Aprilias, my bad, were just like not a stitch of movement, not a stitch of movement from Friday to Sunday. Those bikes were that first sector, that fast right. Now you've got to come in that fast right. It's turn 1 and 2 for some reason. Yeah. You've got to come in there, and you've got to be able to go fast, but keep it tight to line up 2 and 3 or 3 and 4. Okay. So the KTMs would come in there. Most of the bikes would come in there, go fast, and then be forced to the middle of the track, which means they've got to do extra work to come to the right, extra work to go to the left. Oh, please. Martin would come through that turn 1 and turn 2, face on the floor, cranked, flat out.
Flat, yeah.
And then where he wanted. And even when he would forcefully or on purpose go wide to pass, get on the brakes, go on the inside, still make like he's passing Bezzecchi. And I promise you, every single rider that came into that media debrief, they were asked a question on what they thought about watching the players, and they were like, it's jealousy. It's like jealousy at another level. Watching them be able to do that, it's just like unbelievable. So Aprilia, the Bezzecchi and the Martin, two big things from the weekend. Maturity, I think, is a great word to use from both riders. They both stand there going, well, we're gladiators. We're going to compete for this title. We're confident in ourselves. We got the package. We're going to go do this. Martin's got that little bit more of a arrogant edge to him, which I think is going to boast well in those tough situations. Bezzecchi's still that nice kid, but don't what's the saying? Don't what's it? His kindness for whatever weakness. You know what I mean? He's kind, but don't take it too far, because he'll come out and if he needs to.
He'll bite you.
So, Bezzecchi, as you said, and a couple of the comments said, he did come out and say he wasn't really feeling 100% the whole weekend. He didn't really have the feel. He was in the sprint race. He was surprised he led so many laps because he didn't feel. I don't think it's one of his favorite places. So to come out not feeling great, and you pick up second, and you're still in the championship point, that's also championship winning kind of material, that stuff. So it's going to be a great battle, and can't wait for the rest of the season to play out between those two.
Yeah, and we've said it many times, and it's a known fact. You don't win the championship on your good days. You win it on your bad days. And if his bad day was second, well, he'll walk away with a big smile on his face. My only concern is that he's thrown away 2 sprint races at the beginning of the year that he was leading both. And he seemed to brush it off. And at the time, it was okay because Mark wasn't featuring and Digi was the best at Ducati. And he was kind of in a space where he owned it. I think if he looks back to those 2 weekends, he's going to suddenly realize that all the time he kind of wasn't looking at his teammate. Nobody was, in fact. But now suddenly his teammate's his biggest competition. So I just think, and 100% he would have stepped it up. So he's finished. He was very pleased himself to say, well, at least I got points on a Saturday. So, as I say, if his bad day is a second or relatively bad day, well, that bodes well for it. So I think it's going to be it's going to be a duel between the two of them. Whether anyone else is going to be able to match them, it's difficult to say. I think we can almost with certainty write off Ducati as a manufacturer to beat the Aprilias, but it's MotoGP, and we've said it how many times? Never say never.
Mm-hmm. So a comment here from Alex for you, where TNT shows difference between bikes in sectors, and man, those Aprilia bikes were lengths ahead on almost all the turns. So Paul, I don't think you guys get that TNT coverage where
No.
So what TNT do, and I was amazed. So I walked in the media room and I'm busy working, laptop out, trying to look all professional and, typing a message to no one, but just like everyone else is typing. So I've got to type.
So you might as well do the same, yeah.
But then I looked up, and a couple of tables down from me was this I had to kind of blink twice. Chaz Davies, Eugene Laverty, Taylor McKenzie, and was there one more? Conting. But anyway, those 3 guys. So you got Chaz Davies, former MotoGP rider, World Superbike legend, World Supersport champion, Michael Levitt, Eugene Levitt, I should say, World Superbike star, World Supersport star, MotoGP rider, and they had this all they had this logo on their back, Sector or something, Sekter. So anyway, I didn't have the balls or the courage to walk up to them and just say, "Hey guys, this is like the Avengers, what are you guys actually doing here?" So what they actually do is, and I saw a little bit of what they do on the laptop, but they supply this to TNT, and I think they also supply it to teams or whatever. It must be, but they obviously set up a camera at a turn, and they get the turn, and then they overlap. So they take like Martin going through turn 1 and 2, and then they take Pecco or Mark or any other rider, and they can overlap it. And what it shows is you can see they go into the corner, obviously very similar, but then again showing the strength of right where the Ducati and the KTM potentially go there, the Aprilia can stay there. So that's really useful information because again, those kind of things I can see to the naked eye. They all look like they're going fast, but I know MotoGP is by the tiniest of margins. So I know if you add that much of the track on in a 15 corner racetrack, that is your 0.1. And I promise you, and I know it sounds weird, and I know sometimes when I tell Brad it, he probably thinks, "Yes, uncle, yes, you think you know your shit, but shut up." But I can see that when a rider's adding on a little bit more track than others. That's why I said I could see the Aprilia where they were turning tight, getting on the gas, making the track as short as possible. And I've said for the last couple of years doing this show, a short track's a fast track. Pedro Costa was the best at it when he came into MotoGP. He would make the track as short as possible. He wasn't, and Brad and Jack are still trying to do this old traditional, go wide and these fast flowing lines. Michelin is not that tire. You cannot do that. It's a direct, get the bike into that corner and get it out. Don't fuss about. The more time you spend on the side of the tire, the more that Michelin hates life. And if you look at Pecco's crash in the main race, Pecco's riding style is to almost be on the side of the tire for quite a long time. And when I say quite a long time, I don't mean he's there for 10 minutes. You know what I mean? He might be on the edge of that tire for 0.02 of a second longer than Martin. But that is the difference where that Michelin says that's 0.002 too much. Goodbye. And that's the difference. So this team assembles and that's what they do. And TNT show it where they overlap these riders, and that's where the biggest difference can be shown on those Aprilias. While other riders are adding on that 0.002 of lean angle and of track, the Aprilia is just holding that line and lining it up for the next one. And that's the biggest difference. So that was another really cool thing to see in the media center there was that team. So exactly what Alex Follioun says here, showing that it just highlights how good the Aprilia is. So another big thing to take into there. Johan Britson, will Mark win another championship to be top dog over Rossi? Interested to know your thoughts on whether he can still Johan, we kind of touched upon it earlier, so I don't want to get into it too much. I think Mark proved to himself and a lot of people with that Q1 performance that there's still a very capable rider there to go and win races and championships. He just needs to sort his body out. His body wasn't going where his mind wanted it to go. So if he can sort the body out, yes, I think it won't be this year. This year's gone. But certainly next year, you can never count to Marc Marquez out. That's if he wants to come back and what kind of state he comes back in. So I think that pretty much answers that question. Paul, I don't know if you have anything else.
No, I agree fully. I'm just going to say that, remember, Pecco came from, 69 points behind to win a championship. Yeah. So never say never, but it also depends who you're racing against. And now you've got two Aprilias that are performing. Certainly, as of the first 5 races of the year, they are performing better than anyone else, the bikes. And they've got 2 riders on it that are performing. So it'll be a very challenging task for Mark or Digi, or I think they're the only 2 that possibly have a chance of competing with the Bagnaia has been disappointing. What did they say? Is that 10 race crashes in the last 12 races, Sunday races, which is unlike him. But it also boils down to the fact that it could be this tire is, like you say, Rob, it's not a half a second difference. It's a 0.00 difference. And when you and have a look at, besides Mark having a big high side, 99% of all the crashes we see are front end. Yes, we know they're pushing the front because they've got so much confidence into the corner that is, they trail braking nicely in. It's when they either just releasing the brake or as that momentum shift to start accelerating, that it's a you would know it's a 0.00 from off the brake to on the gas, and that's when it's unsettling, and the Aprilia clearly handles that unsettled period better than what the Ducatis and everyone else are. And that's, it's that concentration too. You've got to know that point and feel. And so the feel through the whole chassis with the Aprilia just seems to be on a level above everyone else at the moment. So going back to the question, Mark certainly could win. Will he win again? He'll win again, but will he win a championship? Time will tell.
Ayagura in third place, his first podium in MotoGP. In just this, the rider that kind of went under the radar. He was there, but you didn't think he was going to do what he did. He's been in the top 5 pretty much the whole season. Kota was potentially going to challenge for a podium, and then the bike kind of broke or whatever. But kind of that underestimating a little bit. But this weekend certainly put his name in the hat. Paul, he was so good. Typical Japanese guy. It's so funny, a lot of the riders hop on scooters or something to get through the paddock quick. Mark, stop, and sorry guys, I'm on a scooter. Gone. Old I walks everywhere. He comes down and he walks, and then obviously it's Ayagura. So then people, not as big as like Fabio or Mark, but it's Ayagura. But he also doesn't look like this glamorous MotoGP rider. So some people just walk straight past him and don't even know it's Ayagura, because this is a little Japanese guy like, hi. People stop him and he's almost shy. He's like, hi, why, hi. But he just walks everywhere. And then he comes into the media debrief, and you can just see there's this mature, methodical, analytical rider. He stands there and everything churns. He doesn't just go blah, 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 blah. He goes, and he's quick at it. He doesn't stand there for a minute waiting for an answer. He just gives you the answer you're looking for. And there's no arrogance to him. There's no nothing to him. He's just this motorcycle racing nutter that's happy to be there and just happens to have this phenomenal talent. And watching him on that Aprilia, this is like a match made in heaven. Now, he's going to Yamaha. People are saying, how can he go to Yamaha on the Aprilia? You must understand, as a Japanese rider, to be signed by Yamaha, that's like a dream come. That's like a young Afrikaans boy from Stellenbosch playing for the Springboks. That's your life. That's what you're meant to do in life.
Now you've
arrived. So, but looking at Ayagura, I think he's going to be very good for Yamaha because he's got that compact riding style. He fits nicely on a bike. His style's good. He doesn't waste track and time. He doesn't waste energy on, he's very methodical and calculated like that. He obviously translates information and data really well, because if you look at the step that he's made compared to Raul, who's been there a lot longer, he's making leaps ahead of Raul Fernandez. So yeah, I was very impressed with I've always been an Ayagura fan. Even in his Moto2 days, he was able to, on Sunday races, he has this ability to go through weekends, Friday and Saturday, kind of like there and thereabout, but you don't want to mention him for a podium on Sunday. And then I don't know where the guy, he came out of nowhere. 2 more laps and he would have had Bezzecchi. Another 2 more laps, he probably would have hunted down Martin. That's how good this guy was. First sector, Paul, I'm standing there, and there's only I've seen how fast a motorcycle can go through that first sector now with Martin, and I've seen it. But after 20-something laps, there's got to be a little bit, okay, guys, just slow this down, slow your roll here. Ayagura flicks from right to left to right, which is not an easy task on a MotoGP bike. And he just makes it look like, you watch him and you go, oh, that's really easy. Like, I'm pretty sure I could do that. You know what I mean? You watch Martin and Acosta, you go, no, listen, that's talent. You can't. No one can ride a bike like that. Ayagura makes you believe you can do it because he's that smooth, that precise,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
control.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I know Martin is, fully deserved of rider of the weekend for what he did. But man, Iagura, geez, like Paul, that
Yeah,
was it was sensational. From
yeah.
everything, from the first day I saw him to the last day, to the press conference, to handling the fans, to riding the motorcycle. Very impressed with the Iagura project.
Yeah, I just think the word that I would use to sum him up is just efficient.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
just doesn't look like he wastes
no,
any energy, or he just blends. Like you say, he's so good that he's nowhere.
yeah,
Friday, Saturday, you don't even look to see. Yes, it's disappointing that he doesn't get through to Q1, Q2 all the time, but it never seems to be an issue. Where with Brad, yes, he's our local boy, so we vested in him. But Ayagura, you kind of like, oh, well, he's seventh or he's ninth, or, it never doesn't seem to phase him. Yes, obviously he'd like to be on pole position.
mm,
He'd
mm,
probably win then. But when he's in that zone, and the first third of the race, he also looks like a guy who he doesn't risk anything. He'll pass you, make no mistake, leave half a door open and he'll be through. But he seems to settle into his rhythm,
yeah,
get his pace, and like I say, I think he's very efficient on the
mm,
bike. And
mm,
then once the tires are up to temperature, he's comfortable. He knows exactly what he can do, and we're making this sound very simple. Then he goes. Then he's like, okay, now start picking you off. And he passes people. Never do they show, and the crowd are going, oh, because it's a dodgy move. He
mm,
makes sure that when he's passed you, he's passed you. You know it, he knows it, and he's gone. And that
mm,
to me is just that he was like that 100% on the Moto2 bike, especially the last third of a race. And he's now, like you say, he's progressed. Raul Fernandez hasn't. He's progressed to a point where he's seen what the other guys are doing. He's comfortable. He's confident. He's doing the same thing. He's just doing it from a little bit further back. He doesn't have that, Martin in the first lap or two
yes,
is super aggressive.
yes,
Iagura is not that. And I
mm,
don't think he'll ever become that. I think
no,
what he needs to do is start qualifying row one or row two. And
mm,
then we're going to see him challenging for the wins, because no matter how good you are, and we saw it with Brad 3 and 4 years ago, you can't keep coming from 12th, 10th to 12th place and trying to
mm,
win these races. It's almost impossible. So he's going to have to up that. But certainly a rider who, he's there this year, fantastic. He's really shown us that he deserves his ride. That's why last year, yeah, he had some big crashes. All rookies do, but he got hurt. This year, his efficiency has allowed that not to happen. And yeah, I think there's a good possibility he could end third in this championship. Imagine that, Aprilia 1, 2, and 3. It's
and
not an unrealistic outcome for this season.
not at all, not at all. On the back of that, and I think we're going to go to Barcelona where the Aprilias are going to be good again. I think the
Yeah,
Digis and that there's going to be a couple of other riders thrown in the mix, but those Aprilias are going to be right there again. And as exactly what you said, I think Iagura, if he really wants to challenge, the qualifying is probably the thing that he needs to. And the qualifying, I think, comes with that efficiency. That right, I'm not going to rush things.
yeah,
I'm not going to rush to get myself in onto the front row of qualifying. He wants to make sure Friday and Saturday he's fully prepped to be able to be ready for the sprint race and Sunday.
in
And if that
Sunday. Yeah,
means I must qualify in 8th and 9th, obviously I'm not
yeah,
happy, but I'm not
yeah,
sacrificing time and, like I said, efficiency to be able to get this bike set up the way I want to perform on Sunday to try and get qualifying. Now, you've got to find a balance of that, though, because MotoGP demands that you do that. You find
yeah,
that moment like that Quattararo can find, that Pedro
yeah,
Acosta can find, that Martin. You've got to have that ability to be able to do that while also being able to put something together for the main races. That's what separates the boys from the men type thing. So that's the only drawback of Iagura at the moment, but it's going to come. It's going to come at some point, and it's going to be great seeing him this year on the Aprilia finish it out. And then again, next year with the Pirelli tires and whatever's going to happen, and if Yamaha are able to be competitive again, Iagura is going to be a top name, finishing in the top positions for a very long time. So
yeah,
great to see that.
absolutely.
Great
Yeah,
to see that. We've touched upon DJ Antonio Acosta in 5th. We've touched upon Fabio Quartararo in 6th. Not going to harp on too much about him. He's going to Honda. He's lacked energy on the Yamaha. We know he found the energy this weekend with the home crowd. They love him. They idolize him. They cheered every lap he came past. It's God status there for him. The thing that I took from Fabio over the weekend was in his debriefs. We know, like, a lot of people have been critical, like Neil Hodgson has said, Yamaha, just don't put a mic in front of him anymore because he's very negative.
Yeah.
I didn't see, I saw a negative rider, but I saw him explain it in a way that it makes sense. You know, from the outside, it looked like Quartararo was just this whining baby, which to a point it is, but there's reason behind it. There's method behind it. There's explanation behind it. He would come in, and the Saturday was the best thing. Obviously, Friday he was outpaced. He was nowhere. Alex Rins outpaced. Everyone outpaced him. He was nowhere. Not happy. Saturday found something. Great start in the sprint race. The Quartararo that we've seen so many times put in this fast lap out of nowhere. He's able to just drain every last ounce of energy out of himself and about to get a good lap time. Sprint race, good start, was in there, good result, great. What changed? And he said, I said to Yamaha, stop this going up, down, left, right, and center.
Yeah.
I found a base on this bike, our underperforming bike, and he highlighted that, our underperforming bike. I found a base that I feel comfortable enough to push 100% on and feel comfortable and get the best out of our underperforming bike. But what Yamaha want to do, and I said this in 2022 when I was with Darren Binder on that Yamaha, I saw Darren come in and say, the bike's not doing this, 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 and this, and this. I would then see his crew chief write something down. The Yamaha, the Japanese Yamaha guy would take that information, go sit behind the computer, send it to Japan, and then whatever the computer says no. Type the computer says what Darren's saying is not right. The Yamaha computer says, Yamaha says do this. So they weren't listening to the rider, and this is where Aprilia and Ducati have always at the edge. They listen to the rider, and the Japanese have got to learn that. Listen to your rider, and they were just throwing all that aside. Quartararo said then, and he just stop doing this. Give me my base, and I'm not testing either. We are trying to find performance through settings. His exact words. No more. You give me my base, we will find performance, and I will only start looking for more performance once you supply me new parts. Because with our current bike, there is no setting better than our base. We've tried everything. So stop trying everything. Give me my base, and we can fine-tune it, and I'll work around it, but no more this up, down, left, right, and center. That's got to stop. Until you bring me new parts, stop. And he was adamant. It was like, exactly like I'm saying it now, like very, very pronounced, like stop, this needs to stop, like almost telling Yamaha from the media center to the box, telling them.
Yeah.
And Paul, we spoke about it with KTM. It felt like they were doing that. He's not wrong. Is he complaining? Yes, but he's not wrong. These riders need to go out and perform and feel comfortable. And when you're doing blah, 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 this, it's not going to work. On the flip side of that, I asked Jack Miller the question, like, Jack, Quartararo is saying he's got a base and he doesn't want Yamaha to now, fiddle and find settings. And Jack was like, no, they obviously found something because he found pace from Friday to Saturday. So they changed something that worked. But Fabio is saying, yes, we went back to my base rather than all this shit that Yamaha was. But then Jack's argument is, but we have no base. It's a new motorcycle. Every racetrack we go to is a new track for us, and we don't have a base. Yeah. So the difference there is Jack has no base and is in no man's land, but Fabio is assured enough to go, I have a base. I have a feeling that I like with this bike. Just leave me with that until you bring new parts. Until you bring new parts, don't change a thing. So I saw the whiny side, but I also kind of agreed with him in many ways. Like, listen to the rider. Just listen to the flipping rider, let him do it, and then take it from there. Don't, at the moment they're just bashing heads. Quartararo is checked out mentally for the season. He found the energy for this one race, great. But if you want to improve your package, listen to your rider.
Yeah, you see, that's part of the problem, and we've known it to be a Japanese problem for many years, where the rider says X, the engineer then relays that to somebody in Japan, whomever that is. And I'm sure Quartararo has been there numerous times. He knows who it physically is. But if that guy's inputting something into a computer that's spitting out a different answer, he's relaying that back. 100% they're not listening to their rider. Within reason, there needs to be that compromise. And I think what, we don't want to see, we can see. So obviously, Quartararo, home race, buoyed on by the massive support that you've highlighted that he gets there. He put in 110% or 115%. But funnily enough, I listened to the Oxley Bomb podcast now, and that's something they've said numerous times. They've said there are two riders on the grid that when the Sunday race starts, from start to finish, give you 100%. Fabio Quartararo and Brad Binder. They've highlighted that I don't know how many times. And now they said that about Fabio this weekend. They said, here you've got a guy who, look where the rest of the Yamahas were. How he managed to do 10 laps at that pace and then build up enough of a buffer that he could finish in, what did he finish in, 6th place?
Yeah.
That just shows how talented he actually is. Compared to the other Yamahas, and that's always your benchmark on a new bike. And I mean, it is a brand new bike, but he's in a difficult situation. We know, and now I read the comment from Neil Hodgson, don't let this guy speak.
Yeah.
But is it also right to now gag the guy when what he's actually telling you what Yamaha won't listen to? So now maybe he's trying to find a different outlet where maybe somebody gets the message over the ocean to Japan, where they realize, listen, look what he can do if we maybe listen more to him or involve ourselves less. It's a difficult one, so he needs to deal with it. But we've seen, because they must be careful, he can check out very quickly.
Yes.
And when he does, then we're going to have Yamaha's running the last 4 bikes on the grid.
Well, I mean, Toprak was very complimentary of Fabio. Toprak was like, it's amazing what he's doing. We need to understand how he's doing it and figure it out. Talking about Toprak, I asked him the question, are you feeling comfortable on the bike yet? And he said, still not. I'm talking rider kind of positioning wise. He says, I still sit too high on the bike. I like to sit in the bike and those kind of things. But overall, I was impressed with Toprak, second best Yamaha again, beating Rins, beating Miller. Watching him out on track, the potential's there. You can see the potential's there. They just need to unlock it from the bike. I think next year is going to be the key turning point for Toprak on the Pirelli tires, better performing. Again, I think his biggest thing, other than the riding position, is the tires and wrapping your head around that. Toprak likes feel, and the Pirelli gives you that feel. The Michelins don't give you that feel. They either work or they don't. There's no actual feel. It's one or the other. So that was a key note to take away from Toprak with the whole Yamaha conversation. Rins, kind of just going through the motions now. He's lost his ride. There's nothing much to really talk about there with Rins. Miller, I've spoken about, was massively unhappy. Ralph Fernandez is a tricky one. Like, he was the one rider that's like, when he comes into the media debrief, you're all kind of like, okay, well, he's there. Let's talk to him. You know what I mean? You don't have a need to speak to Ralph Fernandez. I don't know. It just feels like he's been there a long time. He's up and down. Never really makes any real sense of what he's saying. I just think it's a kid that can ride a bike fast, but doesn't really know how to put it all together. It's a weird one with Ralph Fernandez. So I don't know how much longer he's got in the MotoGP paddock either. And Nea Bastianini I'm just going to ramble through these quickly, Paul, because we're already over 2 hours. And Nea Bastianini was a good one. He's got Brad Binder's crew chief from last year, and he said he's really loving that relationship. It's really working well, and we've seen the performances on track. Even this weekend, okay, he had a couple of crashes and stuff and whatever, but there's certainly a better performing Nea Bastianini, which again, I've touched upon it. It's kind of a kick in the teeth in some way of Brad, because Brad with the same crew chief last year was so far better than he is this year. And you've got to give Phil Marin that time as well to adjust to MotoGP. But they were also like, they never really figured it out. Whereas already after 5 rounds, seems like he's figured something out with Nea Bastianini. But Bastianini said, I already feel much better on the bike. What we're doing is making more sense and it's working better. So that was one kind of key point I took from Bastianini. Also, riding style-wise, he's a little bit more direct, like the Pedro Acosta riding style, which I think the KTM is designed to. That's the direction they've taken, which suits him, which is why he's also getting better. And he's outperforming Brad on a week-to-week basis because of those two factors. So that was another key observation I made from a KTM point of view.
Yeah, Bastianini certainly improved. He's got to a point where, last year he was just didn't seem to feature. And this year he's definitely, and it's obviously that crew chief change has benefited him. I just think, I don't know how to take him. When he was on the factory Ducati, he always knew he was the number 2. He's almost like I don't know if he's the same as Raul Fernandez. I think he's a little bit more upbeat, a little bit more in your face, if that's the right word. So you notice him more. But he also, I just don't know. I don't know. The fact that he's connected with the right people in the VR46 Academy and all their contacts, I think that certainly secures him to a large degree. But is he worthy of a top rider? I'm not saying yes or no. I just don't know with him. Yes, he's had a better season than he had last year. But let's give him another 3 or 4 rounds and see how. I'm very neutral on him. I don't have an opinion, which is not a good thing, because you must either say, no, he's cuck and let's move on, or yes, like Raul Fernandez, he's up and down, but one week he's good, the next week, so you can say he's so inconsistent. But Bastianini, it's almost like I don't know. I honestly don't know what to say about the guy. Should he be there? Shouldn't he be there? I don't know. Sometimes I say, that was a good result. Certainly on the Ducati, but then he was on the best bike. Now I'm very confused with him, Rob. So whatever you say, you've dealt with him, you've been in the debriefs, you've seen the guy, you've interacted with him, that would hold some weight towards how I feel. But as of right now, I have no commitment to the guy. And it's not a good thing when you've got a field of 22 of the best in the world, and he's just like I don't know.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. But there is a rider. What's impressed me the most was, I made the comparison that, right, Anaya was outperforming Brad when he was on the Ducati and stuff, great. But now they're on the same machine, and it just showed that Brad is a very capable rider, because he was outperforming a rider that was in a factory Ducati team finishing on podiums. Now on the same bike, Brad was the better rider. But I've just made that key observation that Anaya's found something with his crew chief that Brad used to have. They've clicked and they've found something. So hopefully Phil Marin and Brad can find that click, that's something going forward. As I said, Brad loves working with Phil Marin, but they haven't quite found that formula that works for them just yet. So let's wait and see there. Firmin Aldeguer was an interesting one. He finished 9th in the main race, but Paul, I can tell you, he started the year with the broken leg. That guy is still hobbling around, not just limping, he hobbles around to a point where you should actually just have a crutch. And I look at him and I go, we know the talent that's there. Won a race last year in his rookie year, super fast, super aggressive, nowhere near 100% fit. I mean, if he's 70% fit or 70% right, I'd be amazed. But we've seen this play out before with talented riders where they've got the talent and everything, but crashes and big injuries let them down. And I just have this feeling that Firmin Aldeguer might just fall into that bubble, kind of like an Alex Rins, and a Danny Pedrosa. All the potential in the world, but crashes and being injured are ultimately going to kind of framework your career.
Yeah, it seems that way, Robin. What you say, obviously what we see on TV is the odd occasion you see him walking off or onto the grid, which is very little. They don't show it. You've seen it. And the commentators most certainly have highlighted that he's nowhere near 100% fit. But just on that Rins story, if you think of Rins, 2 years ago, he had that big crash at Barcelona. He's never come right from that. Now, like you say, Aldeguer, it's a big injury. Legs are big injuries. They come back. We've said it how many times. They come back way too soon because I'm going to say they have to. They want to get back. As soon as the guy can get out the hospital bed, they're ready to jump back on the bike. To their detriment, as Mark found out many years ago. So, I don't know. I hope he recovers, because certainly the talent is undeniable. But I think in the back of your mind, while you're not at 100%, you know there's that risk of re-injuring a bad injury already. So you're kind of just holding something in reserve. And at this level, you can't be doing that. So difficult one for him. I just hope that he starts to recover, and we see the Firmin Aldeguer that we saw 3 or 4 times last year, where he's superb to watch. He's really a talent, but he's going to have to sort this out, which is a time thing. You can't make a bone heal quicker or an injury get better faster than what your body can recover. And I know they're probably going in those decompression chambers, etc. But it's still a time thing. So I hope he does come right, because if he doesn't, you're going to see a guy like David Alonso move up and suddenly start beating him as a rookie, and it's not going to do him any good. But certainly the talent is there. Also, maybe this thing about which team he's going to ride for, where he's going. He's happy. He's a factory Ducati contracted rider, so he knows he's got to ride. It might be a little bit unsettling for him too. I would imagine he's very comfortable in the Grassini team, but he's kind of like a bit of a puppet at the moment, where he's being pulled from one side to the next, and possibly being used as a bit of a pawn from the one team to the other two. But I don't know if that plays on his mind, because he knows he's got a contract. But I think it might be a little bit unsettling as well.
Yeah, and I think he's going to battle now with his back-to-back races, and the more grueling the schedule gets. You can see that limb got worse, obviously, after a race, because it's done all that work, and he said he suffered on the bike. So, I just hope it doesn't turn into that, because there certainly is a young, fast, talented rider there. Luca Marini in 10th place. Again, I was just impressed with how he analyzes everything. Again, not the fastest guy, doesn't set the world alight, but analyzes everything. Crashed in the sprint race early on, and then when I was standing in that first sector, literally not even 10 minutes, not even 5 minutes after his crash, there was a Luca Marini sat next to me on his scooter, watching that first sector, because he said in his debrief, we're really battling in the first sector. And there he was, so he's really invested in this. He really wants to make the most of it. He talks like a rider that's invested in it. And I was again, just impressed with the Marini conversation. I think he would be an asset to VR46, his brother's team ultimately, but more so to Ducati, or to any manufacturer on that grid. I really think Marini, his value comes in the form of the data gathering and the data relaying to the rest of the team, and being able to talk through the data and make sense of it all, because he's certainly been a big positive to Honda so far.
Yeah, most certainly. And it is a pity that he's going to lose his ride at Honda, because he certainly, I think, helped them move their project forward probably faster than some other riders would have been able to. But he's also, Honda probably feel he's got to a point where, or they've got to a point now where he's done what he can do. Next year, they're moving to a different bike altogether. So, he's not going to win a championship. We've discussed this numerous times. I think it'll be good if he stays in the paddock. He's one of those guys where I think he'll stay in the paddock because of the people he knows.
Yeah, I think that you can't doubt that, but he certainly has his value in that development kind of role, as we've spoken about so many times. So it was good to see him. Zarco was in 11th, the local man. Friday topped the time sheet, and I kind of had to eat my words, but I still sent it in the debrief that I did. I said at the beginning of the year, I'm going to struggle to see Zarco finish in the top 5. And when he lost us on Friday, I was like, oh, well, I shot myself in the foot here, because he won here last year. But again, just didn't really pull it through the weekend. And he said in his debriefs, he had the crash in the one session that knocked his confidence a little bit. Then he felt a little bit more vibration through the bike. The settings didn't quite feel the same. But one of the key things he did say in the debrief, the question was asked, being your home GP, there's a lot of expectation on you, everywhere. And he said he did feel it. He's got a lot of local sponsors that he's got to go do signing sessions, and the fans, and this and this and this. And he did say, for this track, you need all your energy. And I did feel like I didn't have all my energy for the main race. So, and you could see it in the performance. It was a long weekend for him and Quartararo. Fabio's a little bit younger, but they were pulled. You talked about puppets. They were pulled left, right, and center. And looking at Zarco on that Sunday, he was exhausted, and you could see that mentally, physically, the energy had just gone, and also disappointed that he couldn't take the form that he found on Friday and carry it through the weekend. But if you look at the last 2 weekends, there's definitely been an improvement in both Zarco and Honda, because at Jerez there were really good signs, and again at Le Mans now.
Yeah, absolutely. The problem with Zarco is, and I mean, it's been his whole career, one great weekend, 5 bad weekends, one great weekend, 5 bad weekends. And it just seems to be how he is. I can understand that weight of expectation, 300,000 cheering fans. And as you say, they respect every rider, but they got their hometown heroes. And it doesn't matter where he is in France, he's a Frenchman and he's at MotoGP. So, him and Quartararo certainly had the weight of expectation on their shoulders, and Zarco more so because he won last year. Yeah, it was under different conditions. So yeah, difficult. So I think he had a very disappointing weekend. But one thing with Zarco, he doesn't seem to, he seems to just brush these things off. He knows he's not going to win the world championship, but he's not coming last. And so he had a cuck weekend, and next weekend he'll try again. So yeah, I think that's one thing I like about him. His demeanor is always pretty good, and yeah, I think, as you've mentioned, Rob, that this specific weekend for them must just be insane. So it's almost a 3-day non-stop on the go 24/7, and you've got to fit in 2 practices, qualifying, Q1, Q2, a sprint race, a race. So I think it's a taxing weekend for him, and he's probably so looking forward to Barcelona, where the Spaniards can now deal with all the Spanish fans, and he'll just sit in the pit box and have a Red Bull and carry on.
I want to touch upon a couple of riders to finish off. Pecco Bagnaia looked good on the weekend. Pole position, looked a lot more comfortable on the bike. From the side of the track, like I said, I couldn't really see anything wrong. Bike looks stable. Acceleration out of the corners is still Ducati's strongest point. Going in, they're still good. What I took out of the weekend again, Paul, was I know Ducati are suffering, but to me they're not. And I agree with Pedro Acosta in a way. To me, they're not. The difference is where Aprilia have gone.
Yeah.
So it's not that Ducati are doing bad. Ducati are feeling the effects of what they did to everyone else a couple of years ago. They're getting a taste of their own medicine. So the bike's good. Everything's good. They're just having to try to compete with this Aprilia that's here. That's all it is. And they can. They've just got to sort out 1 or 2 little things. Pecco Bagnaia showed his frustration. I was filming because he was about to climb on a zero scooter, and my job was to get content. I had my phone out, awesome, and then I got that video of Pecco Bagnaia kicking that cone and off the board, and then climbing on the zero scooter and going back to the pit. But I think it's good that you show that kind of emotion, because when a rider crashes and just goes, oh well, that showed passion there. And Pecco's the gentleman of the paddock, Paul. He really is. Smiles all the time in the debriefs, he answers questions. He's just this constant professional. He really is the suit and tie of MotoGP. He really is that worthy champion. He's a professional. But when he sometimes in life we all just need to kick a cone. That's how I look at it. We sometimes just need to get our frustration out. Pecco did that. What I was impressed with was Pecco looked more comfortable on the bike. He showed great pace. He's going to Barcelona. I think Pecco reacts when, okay, Mark's kind of out of the question and I need to be the leader. Pecco can be the leader. And we showed that. He qualified pole. He was in the race. He said there was a slight technical issue on the bike, and he was trying to maintain the pace that he had to try and close in on Martin, and that's why he crashed. He should have actually slowed down. And the question was asked, is this the same technical issue you've had before? And he said, yes. Is it mechanical? Is it hardware? What is it? He said, I'm not going to tell you that. Digging deeper, it sounds like Ducati have this brake issue, or Pecco's had this brake issue, that I don't know if it's brake fade or he loses something, but where he should then slow down by half a tenth even, he didn't. He wanted to keep going, and down he went. The other factor was that a lot of riders complained about, especially the Yamaha riders that went with a soft front tire, thinking, because when they climbed on the grid, Paul, I promise you, I just done a video saying, oh, the skies are clear, it's going to be a dry race. As I got to that turn 1, about 5 minutes before the race started, moisture in the air, and I thought, oof, the clouds have come over. It's got cold. Moisture's in the air. So all the riders made the decision then and there, it's moisture in there, it's going to rain. We've all been told it's going to rain. 2 laps into the race, sun comes out, humidity goes up, and that temperature spikes. And that's what cost Pecco Bagnaia and other riders in the end, because now you've set your tire pressure and tire to a cooler condition. It's now hot. And this is where the Aprilia has become so good as well. The Aprilia is the most adaptable. Ducati used to be that most adaptable. Cold, hot, wet, dry, left, right, the hard braking, soft braking, it did it all. It still does that. The Aprilia just does it that better. And Pecco found that out. As I said, trying to stay with the Aprilia, a little bit too much lean angle for too long, down he went. It wasn't even rider error, because He went into the corner the exact same way he had all those previous laps, but you've got this technical issue, so you're probably holding that brake a little bit longer because you have to, you're forced to.
Yeah.
Tire pressure's now that little bit harder and hotter.
Yeah.
And those are the increments that make the difference in MotoGP, and down he goes. But to be fair to him, he came to the debrief. I was expecting, another cone to be kicked or something to be murdered or something. Came in there smiling, happy, and he said, you know what? I'm really happy with this weekend. I think he found something in himself. And he said, I found something. I feel comfortable on the bike again. I'm looking forward to Barcelona. And I was like, you know what, my bad, credit to you, because 15 minutes ago you were kicking cones. You've got that maturity to come in here, suit and tie. Well done. Still a Pecco fan.
Funny, Rob, you mentioned something immediately when you started speaking about him. You said the story with Marc Marquez. And it's exactly what I thought. An injured Marc gives Pecco, I'm going to say, the number one role. And that's what he likes. And suddenly he's back at the top. And he's the Ducati that they're all looking towards to do well. Even though he's getting drilled by Digi, he's the factory. And that just went through my head. Does he need to be on his own, or does he need to go back to having a Bastianini as a teammate where he's under no threat? I don't know. I just thought that. It's a stupid thing to think, because then, yes, he has been having that brake issue problem, if that's what it is, and he dumped it in the main race. But he certainly looked like a Pecco of 2024, 2023, not last year. Last year was a dejected. We discussed it how many times. This was the first time. And it just so happened to be on a weekend where Marc was, I'm going to say, vulnerable. Maybe he had spoken to Pecco, or the pits or the team knew that Marc was, not in his best form, and it had got back to Pecco. I don't know. He just seemed to, I thought exactly that on Sunday. I thought he's jumped in and grabbed this lead role by the skin of its teeth, and he's going to do something with it. That was my sentiment. What you say about Pecco, and I agree, we can't expect everyone to have that Martin-like focus and that pit bull instinct. He is that calm demeanor that, last year we saw a very dejected Pecco. This year hasn't been great, but this weekend definitely much better. I mean, as you say, to see that emotion, scop the can down the road and then be done with it and get back to the professional thing. I think people, like you say, we're human. We like to see that. So, let's see how he goes. He's always done well in Barcelona. So be interesting to see if he can carry through this leadership, because without a doubt, he's going to be on his own this weekend. So, it might just put him in a spot where he feels comfortable again. He's not, keeping an eye out on the oak on his left. So let's see how it goes.
Yes. Diego Moreira, Joan Mir, no real noticeable things to take out of that. Diego Moreira, one for the future for sure. Again, mature, stands in front of the press, handles himself well, good with the fans. He's going through the rookie season. He's going to go through those motions on the Honda. Joan Mir, I think the best thing he can do is get off that Honda and onto an Aprilia, something a little bit more forgiving, because he's overriding the Honda and he's crashing, and it's no good to anyone in that situation. Alex Marquez was another one, also just very neutral in his debriefs. We're trying, but we're not figuring it out just yet. Almost like what your point earlier, Paul, about Martin. It seems like Alex is going through that, like, right, I had my one really good season. Now I'm just going to kind of take what I can get type thing. I'm a little bit concerned about him going to KTM. I don't know if he's the rider KTM need. KTM needed a Pedro Acosta. KTM Digi Antonio, the Digi now, the best version of Digi, great. The Alex Marquez one, I'm touch and go about. I don't know. I don't know what he's going to bring to KTM. He needs that perfect environment to be able to showcase himself. KTM's not going to be that. It might be the WP and the Pirelli might just be the greatest match made in heaven, and the KTM is going to be the greatest thing in the world. But I don't think he's the dig deep kind of guy. At the moment he's just, oh well, I'm Alex Marquez. Whether I win or lose or finish second or last, I'm Alex Marquez and I'm going to be here. So there's no pressure. It's fun. It's the feeling.
Yeah, he's been disappointing this year because at worst he should have been challenging De Gea and Antonio or Mark for top Ducati. Mark's out of the equation. Bagnaia hasn't featured as the lead Ducati rider. Alex should have been there. His season last year depicted that he should have been there. So he's been very disappointing to me. Fitted straight back into where he was in 2024 and 23 and 24. So, I think he has his limits. I agree with what you say. I think at KTM, we've seen what De Gea and Antonio can do mentally. He
Yes.
can lift himself up. Alex, I'm quite sure he can do it, but will he want to do it? That's the difference. Has he now also got to a point where he said, okay, well, now I'm a factory rider again? Remember, he spent a year at Repsol Honda. Now he's a factory rider. They signed the contract early. They were chasing him. He feels wanted. He's going to go there, and what happens, happens. I agree with your sentiment. I don't know what he'll bring to the party. How good he is at developing a bike, I don't know. Has he ever had to do that? I don't believe so.
Right.
He rode in his brother's shadow at Repsol Honda. Then he spent 2 years at LCR. The test rider was the Japanese guy. Now he's on a Ducati where, they'll look at his data, but I think they'll look at his data below a whole string of other guys. Even last year, I don't think he would have been the first guy. So, what he'll bring to KTM is very interesting. It's a very relevant question. But I think he might just get a fright and find out next year how good De Gea and Antonio is as a guy who, when the chips are down, he can rise to the occasion. I'm not saying Alex can't. I just don't know if he wants to.
Yes, exactly. That's exact. I couldn't agree with you more. Before I get on to the last rider to end the show off, which is Frankie Morbidelli, a question here for you, Paul, and myself, and everyone else in the comments who's ever still around. No pressure, guys. Gut feel. Who is the bike? What is the bike to be on next year? Every bone in my body keeps screaming Honda. David DeVette. So, David, my answer for next year, the bike to be on, I would say, is Ducati. Paul?
Yeah, David, I'm a Honda man. You cut me, I bleed red. And I've been through the last 5-6 years have been shocking for any Honda fan. But as a MotoGP fan, I have to agree with you, Rob. Just looking at the photos of Ducati, who they've got testing their bike, I just think they're going to come out all guns blazing, even though yes, their noses are being bloodied a little bit this year by Aprilia. That's a big issue to Ducati. They're going to come out, they're going to throw everything at this 850. So my gut feel says that the Ducati will be the bike to be on.
Yeah, Andre Calvert supports that decision. So everyone else get those comments in, and we'll get them up there. It'll be nice to see what everyone's perception is of it, because it is in many ways a clean slate. And coming out of this weekend, and just seeing the impact that the Pirelli tires alone are going to make. It's a very interesting question. It's a very interesting one. Okay, Paul, the last one I want to talk about is Frankie Morbidelli. Do you know Frankie Morbidelli?
I've heard the name. Wasn't he once a Moto2 world champion?
Yeah. So Ollie Moto, I don't want to. Ollie's my mate. I don't want to irritate him, but I've seen it so many times. With very frustrating Frankie. You forget he's there. His debriefs have never been that great, other than Silverstone last year. We had that great battle with Marc Marquez. It was the first time I saw Frankie Morbidelli excited about motorcycle racing. This weekend again, Paul, I forgot he was there. Every time, he would walk straight past me, and I'd have to go, shit, that's Frankie Morbidelli. Jeez, yeah. And then I made a note of going to his debriefs, and there's just nothing there. There's just a guy that I think his love for the sport's gone. I don't think Frankie Morbidelli looks completely out of it. He looks destined for Satellite Ducati and World Superbikes. That's Ollie Moto, die-hard Frankie Morbidelli.
Yeah.
But instant comments he made on Sunday after the race was, because everyone else gets 6, 7, 8, 10 journalists around them. The Raoul's and the Frankies get 3, if you're lucky, type thing. But Frankie had 4, I think, on Sunday. Myself, Simon Pedersen, Adam Wheeler, and I think Neil Morrison, I think, were the only ones there. And it was asked, why aren't you finding anything? And he said he almost threw the ball back in Ducati's court. Like, he's very upset with Ducati. He was kind of to the point of, I'm trying to see, did I write it down? I don't know if I did, but it was kind of to the point of Ducati need to remember that they have other riders. Mark's out now. You know, Pecco crashed. Digi's good, but they need to remember they have 4 riders. No, 6 riders. Yeah. Fermin's injured. Alex crashed. Pecco crashed. Mark's injured and out now. They need to remember they have other riders. And they need to remember, like kind of saying they need to remember to support it. It's kind of like he made it out to be that he's been shoved in the corner, sit there, shut up, whatever you get given, you've just got to deal with it. So kind of like not my fault. But again, it's that expression. It's, you know, even Brad and Jack, when they came in there, yes, they're angry and they're like deflated, but they're still pissed off. You know, they're like, I'm like Jack Miller. I'm effing tired of finishing last. Like, let's scream that at the rooftops. I'm effing tired of this. Brad, this is pathetic. This is useless. You know, Frankie doesn't use any of those words. He just goes, yeah. And I just want to shake him. I want to grab him and say, do you know who you are? Do you know what you're doing? You're doing something that, you know, people dream of. You know, what's that saying that more people have been to the moon than have ridden MotoGP bikes, something. Together, my bad. But exactly what Ollie Motor's saying. I think he's just looks like a guy that can go fast on a motorbike, but doesn't love motorcycle racing.
But we said that how many times last year, Rob, that he just looks disconnected. You know, we said it, I don't know how many times. And, you know, I hear what he's saying, that he feels like the forgotten child of Ducati, but he's earned that right by not performing. You know, when Di Giannantonio was in that position, what did he do? He went and won in Qatar. He put himself on the map and he said, this is who I am. Don't forget about me. Where Frankie's kind of done the exact opposite. The more they ignore him, the more he ignores them. And you know what it's like. Then it just gets worse and worse and worse. So, and as I say, he's earned that right by the season he had last year. Had he been challenging for the World Championship a la Marc Marquez, or Bagnaia, their 2 times world champion before that, or Alex Marquez finishing runner-up, or Fermin Aldeguer winning a race in his rookie year, you know, then he'd have the right to say, hey, guys, don't forget about me. But first of all, with his, as you've said, he's got this attitude that just, you know what, I'm a MotoGP rider, and what are you going to do about it? That filters through. People see that very quickly, and that's why he's in that position. And it's so disappointing because certainly, I mean, look at that year on the Yamaha, second on a Yamaha. You know, the potential 100% is there, but the will 40% is there. And that's, I think that's the only difference, you know. But I think also the fact that he's getting drilled by his teammates week in and week out. You know, last year he was ahead of Di Giannantonio. I kept watching because I wanted Digi to beat him, which he did at the end. But for 2/3 of the year, he was ahead of Digi. And I mean, they didn't have great years. Where now this year, he's just like, well, I mean, look, double DNF on the weekend. Yeah, Digi crashed in the sprint, but then he makes up for it on Sunday, where Frankie he's checked out. His mind just is, you know, he's busy riding his satellite Ducati in World Superbikes already.
And it's disappointing because he came on the back of was it a podium finish at Jerez in the rain in the sprint race?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it was.
You're kind of thinking, there's the bump that you need, and he's not there. The love for motorcycle racing is not there. Even a satellite Ducati in World Superbikes. I don't know if it. I think he'll do it because there's money and the career, but he's not in love with bike racing. So it's
absolutely.
It's there for everyone to see, and it's unfortunate because he's in a great position and he's not making the most of it.
And I mean, he's got the world at his feet. He's in probably the second best team to be in. You know, it's run by Valentino, or owned by Valentino Rossi, run by his henchmen. You know, what more could you actually want? He's part of the VR46 Academy. There's 50 million Italian youngsters that would give their left nut to have that position. And he's just taken it he's actually squandering it. And it's disappointing, but you know, that's just how life works. And, you know, certainly this season, without a doubt, will be the end of Frankie in terms of any MotoGP career.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. Ollie Moto, I've got to come with you to Brands if Rossi comes again next year for the car racing, because it does seem like a really good way to meet him and get stuff signed. I have to add a Rossi helmet to my collection. Yeah, I keep looking on Marketplace for a really cheap one to come up. But yeah, that'll be a great hangout, and great. I saw the pictures of you with your nephew, and that it's great. Rossi's always been an absolute legend when it comes to that, and the fans, no doubt about it. Daryl Holmes, thank you so much for joining in the show. And yes, you're absolutely right. 14 hours of bikes this coming weekend. MotoGP Barcelona, World Superbikes, and Moto America. So we've got Darren Binder in Moto America Supersport, Cam Peterson, Moto America Superbike, Matthew Scholz, Superbikes, Dominic Doyle, Moto America Supersports, MotoGP, of course, Brad and Rashay Woodley, and then World Superbikes is World Superbikes. So a lot of racing there. One thing I'll also touch on quickly before we go, I've got one for you, Rob. Pop me a message. Oh, yes, Andre, you beautiful man. I'll definitely pop you a message. But it's now getting it from South Africa back to you. But we can make a plan. Andre, I'll pop your message. Thank you. Just talking about, don't forget BSB, of course. Oli Moto, BSB this weekend.
We don't see that Oli Moto, so you can't mention that,
no,
please.
But I can. So yeah, BSB this, I mean, jeez, what am I going to tell the family? I've just been away for like 3 weeks. I'll find something. But
tell them you're just spending the weekend at home.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's not as easy when you've got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. I can tell you that 7-year-old likes to play dress up princess every 3 seconds. One thing I will touch upon quickly as well, Paul, to end the show off, Rashay Woodley, South African Moto3 rider. I saw him, great to spend time with him and his dad. You know, I've always looked up to Arushan, always been a kind of role model to me. But just bad luck, mechanical issues every single round this year so far. So that's the stuff you don't kind of hear or see. Brazil had a clutch problem or something this weekend. From the first session, had this gearbox problem that, you know, they come and they KTM was going to sort out. It never gets sorted out. They just haven't sorted out this bike. They blew an engine early on in the year. Then you only get X amount of engines, so they had to use an old engine which was slow. Put a new engine this weekend, but then the gearbox didn't work, and it's just like it was exhausting hearing all the problems that they've dealt with. You know, Rashay is also putting a lot of pressure on himself. You can see he's riding stiff, and why wouldn't he? You know, it's a paddock where there's 2 million Spanish and Italian kids waiting to take a spot. So you can see there's a rider kind of riding, looking over his shoulder type thing, not just focusing on the job at hand. So yeah, let's get behind Rashay Woodley. Let's get behind Brad Binder. Let's show them love. They're both in tough places at the moment, but they both have what it takes. We desperately need South Africans in that MotoGP paddock. So let's show them support that hopefully they can turn it around. And let's show them the same support that those French fans show Quartararo and Zarco. No matter where they finish, no matter where they are, they cheered and stood up for them like they were winning the race by 100 seconds. So let's do that for our boys, please.
Yeah, absolutely. We got to back them. You know, they're giving it their all, and circumstances, like you mentioned now with Rashay, that we know nothing about. We look and we see him 19, 18, 19, 20. We're like, come on, kid. But we don't know the backstory. So, yeah, let's just hope that things work out for him and for Brad, and, you know, that they can have a great weekend. I'd love to see Rashay in the points. It just shows how competitive it is, that, you know, he has a kid who really can ride, and he's struggling to score points.
It's cutthroat, Paul. You can't believe the talent. Watching those Moto3 riders, man, yeah, at that age to have that much talent and that much skill is very impressive. So listen, that whole weekend, even the Moto2s, those riders are good. Every single rider, Moto3, Moto2, MotoGP is good. Moto2 racing was fantastic. Moto3 was probably the most, I'll never use that word boring, but the most that it's been for a long time, purely because of the weather. Predictable, I suppose is a good word to use there. Moto2 was fantastic, and watching and hearing those bikes on the side, oh man, it's just it just makes Paul, I can't tell you, I really was a kid in a candy store. I just turned into this stupid fanboy that drools everywhere, and I try and act professional, but I just can't. It's just not going to happen. I wish everyone could be there. But Paul, thank you so much. KTM Store, thank you for tuning in, and go, everyone in the world of Facebook, go check out KTM Store's page and follow it. James Thompson, excellent show, roll on the weekend. Paul, thank you. Everyone in the comments, thank you. 2 hours and 49 minutes going on. It's got to be a record for us. We had a lot to talk
Yeah, I
about.
think it is.
We stayed there, Paul. I know it's almost midnight your time. So thank you so much. And yeah, let's enjoy a great weekend in Barcelona this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely awesome once again, Rob. I can't believe that it's nearly 3 hours. It seems like 15 minutes. But yeah, looking forward to Barcelona. I've been there. I've watched MotoGP there. To me, it's my favorite track. Maybe not the atmosphere, but the track layout. I just think it's fantastic. And normally, very good racing. So let's hope we get some good racing. For those who are not Aprilia fans, 2 years ago, Aprilia dominated there. So let's see what happens this weekend. But really looking forward to it. And Rob, yeah, next Tuesday, it's going to be another great evening.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night, everyone.